Good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to everybody to this Welsh Ambulance University Trust board meeting. A couple of things I always say for anybody who's joining us externally, that this is the end of the governance cycle. That most of the heavy lifting is done in our committees, and we will hear about the committee work as we go through the agenda. And the purpose of this meeting is, of course, not to redo all of that, but just to assure ourselves that work has been done. And if there are any major issues for those to be highlighted, committee chairs will do that either as we go through the agenda or at the end where there is a specific item for that purpose. We have a number of apologies this morning. We have apologies from Lee, Brooks, Kerry Jackson, Carl, Lee Shaw, Chris Turley and Hannah Rowan. We also have Bethan with us on screen. Good to see you, Bethan. Can I check you can hear us okay? Perfect. Very good. Thank you. We have Anthony Evans and Rachel Williams who are supporting us with our sign language obligations. And I think that probably sets out all I need to say by way of welcome. So if everyone's content, we will crack on with the agenda. So the first item 2 is declarations of interest, just to check if there are any declarations of interest in relation to agenda items that people want to raise. No, so that's great. Thank you. Next item, item 3, is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting, which have all been circulated, I think, and in the pack, the meeting on the 25th of September and also the October the 23rd meeting. Can I ask if there are any reasons for addendums or changes to those minutes? That you'd like it, everybody content to approve those? Thank you very much. They are approved. There were 4 items, item 4 items on the action log, all of which have been completed. Again, just pause to make sure that nobody wants to raise any questions or issues around them. Everyone's content, so fine, we can consider those closed. Okay, so we come to item number 5, which is my report and the Vice Chair's report. The Vice Chair, Kerry Jackson, is not here today, but her report was included in the papers, so I think that is read. I'll attempt to answer any questions if there are any in a moment. One of the things I particularly want to just talk about before we move on is the fact that we've had, unfortunately, 3 of our colleagues passing on in very recent times, and it's worth, I think, just spending a few moments just talking about them if people would give me that moment. First of all, I'd like to just spend a few moments talking about Paul Hollard. Paul was a non-exec director here for his full 8-year terms and sadly passed away a few weeks ago. I would just like to publicly provide, my thoughts about Paul, because when I came here 3 and a bit years ago, I was completely new to Welsh Ambulance, and Paul at that time had been a non-exec director with others for some years, and he gave me, complete and unstinting support during that time. So I was extremely grateful to him for that. Not only had he been a non-exec director here for 8 years, but his whole career had been with Wales and with the Welsh NHS. He had started as a nurse, he'd moved into nurse education. His career had moved on to be chief executive at one of the trusts in North Wales, and he became the interim chief exec before he retired at Cardiff and Vale. I'm going to ask Angie, who's worked with him a little bit from the sort of executive side, just to say a word or two about Paul before we move on.
Thank you, Colin. And yes, I'm just going to give a brief recognition for Paul in terms of the role he played as chair of the People and Culture Committee in particular. I've been here 3 years and he actually was on my appointment panel. His passion for people and culture was like nothing I've ever seen before. And I think it's really testament to his work that we have a flourishing people and culture plan, which has his narrative in it, but more than that, behind the scenes, the work he did around speaking up safely, meeting with our Speaking Up Safely Guardian, but also meeting with members of staff who potentially had concerns, worries. And I think that hidden work that he did in particular, when nobody was watching, was testament to the type of person he was. And perhaps just as importantly, he never lost his passion for WAST. Right up until, he passed away, he was still engaged with us, talking to us about the work that we were doing, and absolutely wanted WAST to be the best possible place for patients to receive that great service, but also for our staff. I don't think I've ever seen anyone who cared so passionately about the staff. So just wanted to acknowledge that and say he will be sadly missed.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angie. And then we had 2 of our operational staff who very tragically passed away also whilst not between the last meeting and this one. And that's Richard Durkan, who worked in the urgent care service, and also Natasha Harper, who was a community first responder, who both sadly died. So I wonder whether we could just spend just a few moments just quietly thinking about Paul in particular and our other colleagues who are not with us anymore. Thank you very much, everybody. The other thing I'd just like to mention is we say farewell to Steve today, Steve Owen, who is retiring after, I think, 15 years or so in the corporate governance team. And Steve, we wish you well and thank you very much for the service that you've given us, which I know has been exemplary, as you've been, pivotal to a lot of the things that have been going on in Welsh Ambulance for the last 15 years in your role, taking minutes in meetings and attending minutes and being right in the centre of what's been going on. And so we want to thank you very much and wish you a very happy retirement. Okay, moving on then to the formal reports. My report and the Vice Chair, Kerry's report, were in the pack. We'll take those as read, and I'll just pause for a moment to see if anybody's got any questions on activities that I've been engaged in or that Kerry's been engaged in the last few weeks. Looks like it was a comprehensive report. Excellent. Good. Thank you very much. Brilliant. In that case, let us move on to item number 6, to the Chief Exec's report. Emma, over to you.
Thank you very much. So I'll take the report as read. I just want to highlight a couple of things. So the first thing is to thank everybody, the board, partners, stakeholders and colleagues for making me feel so welcome. I definitely feel like I've been here more than 7 weeks, which I think is a good thing. It's a good thing. So a couple of things I just want to highlight from my report. We've obviously got our phase 2 launch that starts next week. And today there's lots of comments from both Welsh Government and from WAST around that launch. So you might hear much more, particularly today. Staying with sort of performance, we've got across Wales an NHS reset 2 weeks, which is from the 8th to the 22nd of December. And in there, as part of winter planning, is the instruction around improving handovers for health boards, but also to improve things like early discharges as well, weekend discharges. So a number of things Health Board have been asked to do. And for us, we'll need to support them very much in the discharge space. And of course, we continue to be grateful for our colleagues that are working on reducing the handover delays. Linking in with winter planning as well, you'll note in my report, we talked about that there could be some industrial action. A formal update is that Unison didn't get enough members to vote and ballot, which means there won't be industrial action at this present point in time. So that's good news for us, obviously, as an organisation when we face winter. We are working really hard with our commissioner around our annual plan and our IMTP, and we've met with them to sort of reset relationships, to start to think about what's the space where we can discuss our performance versus what's the space where we can discuss with our health board partners our strategic intent and our priorities. We've got a very early submission going to them on the 30th of November. This will be the work that we did as a board and we've done with our colleagues over the last number of weeks. Very high level, very draft. But it will start to give us a sense to the JCC about what we want to do next year, which we've talked about being a period of solidifying and consolidating the changes that we've been putting in place in this last year. Linked to that then as well is the new MIQPR. And again, JCC are really interested in seeing that to see if actually they can utilise that data as their data set for performance management. So that could simplify our world quite significantly. So I won't mention our colleagues because thank you, Colin, for doing that. I think the only other thing is you'll notice in our capital planning and our capital projects, we've talked about some of the stations that we're upgrading and you'll notice Monmouth. So it would be remiss of me not to mention that a few weeks ago, Monmouth had the terrible floods that they did, and a huge thanks to our colleagues for helping in that emergency situation. It also means that we're just going to rethink and relook in terms of have we got the right flood defences for our brand new station to make sure that we're doing all that we need to do in that space as well. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll open up questions to Emma, if there are any. Yes, yeah, straight in there. Excellent.
Yeah, just thank you, Emma. Just a couple of questions I was keen to understand a bit more about. One was around the conveyancing review, which sounds like a really important actual assessment. So it'd be good to understand what the timeline might look on that. The other thing I suppose would find particularly helpful to see in paragraph 14, you make a reference to staff being encouraged to have new vaccines. Because I'd really like to see the kind of figure in there in terms of where are we at, because it's so important in terms of keeping people well in work and the contribution to the population uptake. So I think that would be really helpful. And my other question slightly relates to what you were just saying about the kind of strategic intent. So it was great to be at the volunteer ceremony, really, really uplifting conference there. But what I'd like to understand more about is what is our strategic intent? What is our strategy in relation to volunteering?
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So I'll start, but I'll hand over to my colleague as well, if that's okay. So since I started in my role, and I've met health boards, chief execs particularly, one of the things that they've said is this sense of, are we conveying the right patients? Because that obviously supports the hospital flow. And the second is a comparator around, and are you conveying more in my area and not somewhere else? So there's a piece for me about, we need to have the facts. We need to actually understand what the realities are. So I commissioned Andy to do that review around what are we conveying and the comparison between health boards as well. So we can start to have conversations about what do we need to do differently, but also potentially do a little bit of myth busting where if actually there aren't that many disparities between health boards. But I'll let Andy talk to, any more detail he wants to add, but also the timeline.
Yeah, so as I say, it's the review's taking place at the moment. We've done a comparison on two of the health boards at the moment. What clearly came out through that review was the demographics of the patient cohorts to see is quite different in terms of age. So in one health board, the age of the population within there was significantly higher, and those calls coming to us were generally from the older population. That peak in terms of age group was very much levelled out in their neighbouring health board. So, calls, a lot less calls from older people, more calls from young people. So essentially, it's a bit of an apples and oranges comparison when you compare one health board to another, because clearly these patients will present much differently. So where that takes us then to is to how do we work with the health board to say, well, what are the options we need within that community to support patients to remain at home with their presenting illness versus what do we need in their neighbouring community? So that's one piece of work, but it's quite labour intensive to do that across the whole of Wales. It will be a challenge. So I'm probably going to be reluctant to do comparisons between one or the other, because I don't think it's fair. It's probably about understanding individual populations as opposed to comparing. What we've also started with my team as well is this week they've done a number of quality visits, talking to our staff at the front of the EDs, but also on stations as well, as to getting their views on what do they need, what tools do they need, or what facilities or support do they need to manage more people working from the ED. So that was completed this week. We're just collecting that data now, so there'll be information coming through on that.
Thank you. In terms of flu, I'm hoping one of my colleagues can tell me what the flu vaccine rate is. I think Andy can.
Yeah, Greg was on the ball. I've just messaged him just as you were talking. As of Monday this week, 21.5%.
That's low, isn't it?
It is low, yeah. We have had some issues with vaccine supply this winter, which we're escalating. Because we've had to effectively move supplies between stations, so that hasn't particularly been helpful to us in the endeavour. So we're escalating that we can't purchase them ourselves. So there's definitely been a supply issue, but yeah, we definitely would want that to be more.
Sorry, Emma, just on that.
yes, of
the
course.
good news is as well, Greg's just updated me. We now have stocks of both sets of vaccines that we're using as well.
Great, so that's resolved. Brilliant. Thank you. And then in terms of our strategic intent for volunteers, I think there's two or three things here. I think we know our volunteers are going to be really important to our purple and our red arrest. We know that we've got Save a Life Cymru as well, who are helping us. So I think there's a lot we need to do in terms of connectivity around our volunteers, from our community first responders to our welfare responders to falls. So I think there's a huge amount. So our strategic intent around volunteers is we need to grow them. And if I look at previous board reports, I see that I think we've benchmarked, is it Holland or the Netherlands, where they have a greater ROSC rate because they have a lot of volunteers. So we're definitely working on our strategic intent and our positioning. I did this week meet the Scottish CEO of the Scottish Ambulance, who of course have massive rurality issues as well, because I think there's a rurality link here. And we hope to be sharing much more around how they're coping as well with embedding and increasing their volunteers and how that's helping with their performance.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Anna and Emma, any other questions? While we just pause to see, can I just welcome Angela? Angela from WAST, you've joined us today with a patient voice, so good to see you and welcome to you. I've got a couple of things I just mentioned. People will remember that our erstwhile former chief exec, Jason, was elected to be the chair of ACE, the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives, a role which he continues to do in his new role in London Ambulance. And you will note from the paper that Emma has taken on the role of the chair of the Women's Network within ACE. So Welsh Ambulance Service is well supported in ACE, which is good to know. And the other thing I was just going to mention, it may come up somewhere else in papers, but I've just noticed you highlighted the fact 18,000 conversations with the bot.
With the bot.
I just wonder whether it might be worth just pausing a couple of minutes just to hear a little bit more about that.
And I'm definitely going to pass on to Johnny to talk about Albert and what we can do with Albert.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you. I suspected that was coming my way, actually. So yeah, it's 22,000 conversations as of yesterday. The bots had, more importantly, the engagement levels with the bot seeing an increase month on month. So that's representative of around 7 to 8% of our call volume. So what we're working on at the minute is those phase 2 elements of the bot. So that's integration into WhatsApp. We're currently working that through in terms of the technology solution. Improvement on languages that the bot's available in. So this will be looking at an enhancement on the Welsh language, Polish and Arabic specifically. And we're also looking around our web chat capability. So this is having a human at the other side of that web chat technology. And we're looking to do a soft trial of this next year across January to March. So we're just working through some of the details of that. But really, this is our first step into the use of agentic AI. Where this can go is phenomenal. But what we are doing here is taking a really safe, considered and clinically sound approach to web chat usage.
Thanks very much. Hayden.
So can I just ask another question? So in terms of learning from that, have we got any intel on any issues and how that's developing?
Yeah, so we've had around 1,000 pieces of feedback so far from patients. So we're just working through that. Mixed reviews, as you would expect. Some of it is on speed, which has been really good. Some of it's been on content. So we're looking around a separate piece of work, which I'll touch on later, around directory of service. So there's currently, I think, 22 versions of a directory service across the Welsh footprint. There was a statement issued at the beginning of this month around an intention from government to bring that into a single DOS. So we're really well connected with that work. But a lot of the feedback so far is on what the bot sits on. So things such as the directory of service. So some of that work is in pipeline. It will take time to move, but we are working through that. We've got a phase 1 report, which will be due in January next year, which I'll look to bring back through board just to give us a flavour for that. And then there'll be a follow-on from phase 2 in around May 2026, which will give us a test around the WhatsApp and the web chat capability as well. So we're really keen to learn from what we're hearing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, Haley. Any other questions? This is a matter of interest. If anybody didn't watch it, hasn't watched it yet, there's a program on television recently I watched, which about AI, which was a program featuring the blind comedian whose surname I never know quite how to pronounce, but Chris McCausland. If anybody, did you watch that program? Oh, okay. I strongly recommend that you find it'll be on the iPlayer. I think it's BBC Two programme. Absolutely extraordinary. He was in America, and it was a documentary not about his life, but about the way in which artificial intelligence was helping him to live a more active life as a blind person, and the way he was using his mobile phone to learn more about the environment that he was in. And he was using his mobile phone to, for example, look out of the window and talk to him about the weather and give advice on what clothes he could wear. There was one extraordinary moment where he was taking an item of clothing from his wardrobe, showing his mobile phone to it and asking whether it was clean, whether it was a blue or black one, and whether it needed ironing.
Wow.
And the voice came out of his mobile phone, not the kind of electronic voice that you hear, but it was a real human voice. It was just like a conversation with a human being, saying, hello, Chris, yes, you're holding up the blue version of your so-and-so jacket. It does look a bit creased and it could do with a bit of an iron on the sleeves. And,
Wow.
and that was just one example, and there were a lot more in the programme. And it just really opened your eyes to the large language models and the way in which the language of being able to communicate with this kind of artificial person has become much more human and incredibly interactive, and the ability to actually take information from the environment dialed in by your mobile phone camera and so on, which has huge resonance, I think, with things that we could be doing in terms of providing remote care. So well worth a watch, I think, because it really opened your eyes to just how powerful this actually is, for good or ill. Okay, all right. In that case, I think we're probably complete with your section, Emma. So thank you very much. Although I would perhaps I can just say one other thing. You mentioned about wait 45 and handover delays. Obviously, we'll talk about that in greater detail when we come to actions against mitigating harm. But I just wonder whether you wanted to say anything in advance of that, more strategically in relation to the way in which you're sensing this is going through your conversations with health board chief execs. You might touch on it now, and then we'll come back in more detail to the practicalities of it later.
So we obviously have a variable picture across Wales. So some health boards are delivering wait 45, as we call it, reasonably consistently. And there's others that are struggling to do so. So we know that the Cabinet Secretary at the NHS Confederation talked about the release to respond, as we're calling it, protocol, and the need for that to be consistently applied. And then I think the following week, Jacqueline Totterdell, the NHS CEO, NHS Wales CEO, had been interviewed where she described this again. So for a number of weeks now, we have been working as a small group of execs led here by Lee, Liam and Andy to start to build up a protocol that effectively follows the English protocols, which is at 45 minutes, we move away. So we've been working on that for a number of weeks, and NHS Wales Performance and Improvement have now started to sort of formally place that through their governance routes. So starting in what's called Chief Operating Officers Group, and then moving into a wider group, which is specifically around ambulance handovers, which have representations of clinical and operational people from all the health boards. So where we are at this point in time is that we have a draft protocol. There was a meeting that Rachel attended this week, the NHS Wales Leadership Board, where they briefed around the protocol and the expectations. There are still a number of things I think that we need to iron out. We need to iron out when it's actually going to take effect. So there is a sense that some health boards will need a number of weeks to actually do the things they need to do to be able to enable us to effectively leave at that 45-minute. We suspect that that's going to be the month of December. And possibly then the new protocol will launch in January, but we haven't been given any definitive dates. I think the reset 2 weeks of the 8th to the 22nd of December, if they're resetting and part of that reset is prepping for the ambulance handovers, I actually think that's quite useful because they'll be looking at it quite holistically. So I would be hopeful around that this would land as a protocol in January. Couple of things for me that are not yet quite resolved. One would be who makes the decision that in extremis we don't do it. So that's sort of not yet been sort of dealt with. In England, it's very clear it's always NHS England, but it's different here. NHS Wales doesn't really play as much of an operational role as maybe their counterpart in England. So that's one of the things that we need to sort out. But I'm hopeful that we're going to get a directive. The other piece then will be, what's the accountability framework for the health boards if they don't deliver it? And of course, that's not for us to answer. And I think that's the piece that NHS Wales has to work out as well. What's the consequence of not doing it?
Yeah, exactly. All right, I'm sure we'll talk more about that when we get to getting harm, but it's worth getting sort of the chief exec's helicopter view, as it were, from where that's going. Thank you very much. Okay, so item number 7, if we move on, then is questions from the public. So we go with bated breath to Estelle to find out whether we have any questions.
And today, Chair, we don't, unfortunately. So if any members of the public are watching, please remember that we are always welcoming questions to the board. We did have one that came in from a member of staff, and it was deeply operational about a clinical matter, which I think Andy has dealt with offline because it was it was to do with something that was sort of not at a strategic level for the board, but clearly very important to that member of staff. So we've dealt with that separately. But other than that, not today, Chair.
Okay, good. Thanks so much. So I'll just echo that. If there is anybody watching who wants to raise questions, we're always happy to receive them and do our best to give them a full answer in these public board meetings. In that case, we'll move on, and we'll move on to item number 11, which is item number 8, which is our staff experience section. And so a really warm welcome to Rashna. And you're going to talk us through your experience, I think, as a graduate management trainee within Welsh Ambulance Trust.
I think Angie's going to.
Angie, are you going to?
Yeah, do you mind? So, thank you so much for joining us, Rashna. And there's a couple of reasons why Rashna is with us today. Not only because she is absolutely awesome, but she is our graduate management trainee. And I had the very good fortune that Rashna came to work in our People and Culture Directorate, and particularly in our ED&I space and our OD space. And the work she has done during that particular placement has been phenomenal. So I thought it would be great, particularly as we've got the anti-racist action plan and our response to RES on the agenda today, to hear from Rashna in terms of her experience so far. And over to you.
Thank you. So stand and speak on. How would you like me to speak? Would you like me to stand or?
No. I mean, just wherever you feel most comfortable. Okay. If you want to stand, please do. But we're more than happy if you think. We all stay seated, so please, whichever you feel best.
Okay, I'll start. So firstly, I just want to say thank you very much for inviting me today to share my story. I am a bit nervous because doing a presentation on a certain topic is easier, and then talking about yourself is actually difficult, so you can understand my nerves. So a bit about myself is I moved to Wales 22 years ago, and everyone's in London, they'll ask me, why did you move? Well, people here do ask me, and the reason I moved was I wanted a big house for a quarter of the price. That is the truth, and that's what I did get. But what I didn't realise is the big difference between a big city, because I was born in London, and I moved to Newport, and there's a big difference in many ways. So I've been qualified dental nurse. That's been my career before coming into this graduate program. Came to Wales, and then I moved. I was working in private in London, but when I moved to Wales, I worked for Community Dental for Nair and Bevan, delivering the Welsh Government Design to Smile program. So it was very operational. I'd go to school, look at children's teeth, and apply fluoride, and that suited me because I was a mum of 3. I worked 2 days, 9:30 to 2:30, so it was perfect for me. Alongside that, I found a charity called Kid Care for You, and I dedicated a lot of my time to that. Over the years, the charity is in a good place, people running it, and my children have grown. So I found time for myself. And then I looked into jobs, and I came across the NHS graduate program. I never dreamt that I'd get in because I'm 47. I never thought at my age I'd be accepted. And I was taken back. It was 7 months process. And at the end, when I got that offer, I was like, wow, I can't believe I've actually been selected. So that's my journey to here. Now joining WAST, and I just want to share a bit about my growth and challenges. So obviously working in a very operational role for a very small department, and coming my placement in WAST in the corporate side was, I was taken back. I was overwhelmed. I'm not going to lie. And then learning about observing things in a strategic level. This is something I have not experienced. And I think my biggest challenge has been the acronyms. And what I've also learned is like in different directorates, there's different acronyms. And sometimes there can be a whole lot of conversation and I haven't actually understood a word. But I have had people kindly who've given me a list of those acronyms, which I still haven't learnt, but it's making sense now that I've been here 15 months. And what I've seen here since I've come is so when I was operational in Iron Bevan, there were lots of things I never understood, and sometimes being at that level, I was a band 5. There used to be frustration. Now coming into this role, I see where it comes from, and that's helped me understand how a lot of staff feel the way they do, and they feel that disconnect from leadership when that message isn't conveyed. I think I'm going off on a tangent, bringing my personal story. So part of this program I'm doing an MSc in applied health leadership, and the very essence of the course that I'm doing is compassionate leadership. And what I'm learning in university when I come into placement is very valuable. Had I done the MSc full-time without this placement, I think I would not have understood it. But what they're trying to teach us, and when I come into practice and I see leaders and senior leaders, the way they work, the way they manage projects and bring change and change management, it all makes sense. And I think this is really valuable for graduates like myself to be given this opportunity for health boards to take us on and to give us this exposure experience. I know sometimes having graduates it might be an extra task for a health board where you're going to put them to coordinate it. It's an extra job for somebody, but it's greatly appreciated, and it really does help and shape us to learn. Just the theoretical side wouldn't be enough with this practical element. Now, the highlight of me being in the ambulance service is the BEAM network. So when I came into WAST, I was placed in OD, in People and Culture. And then Angie asked me if I would take on, if I would come into the BEAM network, which wasn't as active. And this is what I want to explain to you, the sense of belonging, why staff networks are very important. So when I came into WAST, they call it an organizational safari. And I remember Trish laughed when I said that. It's because it's a safari where 2 weeks you see everything and then you're put into your roles. So when I went into the call center, I went in very excited, but I was taken back. I think there was like nearly over 100 people, but nobody looked like me. There was no person of color. And I've never seen that before. Wherever I go, you do kind of see people of color, but especially the ambulance service, you would think it's part of the NHS. Like, wow, I was like, everyone was very polite and nice, but immediately I felt like, oh, nobody looks like me. So a few weeks after that, I found out about the BEAM network. And again, in the BEAM network, there weren't that many people involved and there wasn't really much happening. But that gave me a space to be myself and to get that sense of belonging. And through the BEAM network, I've been able to connect with a lot of people. I've been able to get people to come over to our network events and understand things from a different perspective, to see how we need to be engaged and make these spaces sort of a safe space, but also a place where they feel they belong. Because only when you feel like you belong somewhere, you can actually do your best and you can be happy. So I'm very proud of this BEAM network. Like my face will beam and shining when I'm talking about it, because we've done a few events, and just want to say thank you for everybody who supports it. So yeah. Apart from my day job, I do have other voluntary roles. I'm a magistrate for the Gwent Bench. I'm a board member for the Bevan Foundation, and I'm an independent advisory group member for the Gwent Police and for the University of South Wales. And I'm also a panel member for the selection of Gwent High Sheriffs for every 5 years. Many may say, how do you balance all this? How does it work? But if anything, it's a strength. It's a strength because I'm in these different roles. I have different experiences. I see things from a different perspective. And you can bring this over to your normal day job where you can share ideas, and I have done, and you do make a good sense of network. And these things are not a weakness, having multiple roles. If anything, it does make you stronger. And actually the sense of reward you get from doing a voluntary role, it's very valuable. Words can't describe it. I was also the BBC Children in Need advisory member for Children in Need and for Newport Live, but I left that because I thought there has to be a balance. There's only so much I can do. So for now, I've left that. my passion really does lie in representing diverse communities, because as I mentioned earlier, that I'm originally from London. London is like, I think, 25 years ahead of Wales. So when I came to Wales, the opportunities and the inequalities was very evident. It was very large. In London, we're talking about fourth generation diverse communities. So they've come out of that cycle of the barriers like perhaps my parents had. But here we're still first, second generation of people. And with that comes those challenges, and they're directly linked to health as well. I'm very passionate about advancing equality and inclusion in Wales, and that's why I do all these voluntary roles, because it's very important to have that perspective. And just as a very short example, I was in court 2 weeks ago, and there was a case, and it was because the other magistrates and the prosecution and the police just didn't understand this cultural perspective. A person was going to lose out on a lot of money. And I was able to make them understand that in certain cultures, a deal is just done with a handshake without any papers. In some countries, it's very normal to do a deal in another country and exchange money in a foreign country. And so this is just an example I want to share why it's really important to have a diverse workforce, because if you don't have that, you don't see different lenses. What may be wrong or may seem like is a normal way of practice actually may be a very normal way of practice for somebody else. And it's not having that sort of prejudgment. And I hope, like being in this position I am in and moving forward, that I'm able to take that forward in terms of policy knowledge and lived experience. And my main vision is to reduce health inequalities for diverse people in NHS Wales. Looking ahead, it's exactly what I said. And but I'm committed to learn. My mum always says there's no age to learning, and I'm definitely experiencing that. So, and I do want to say one more thing. Being in a space like this, you do get imposter syndrome. Sometimes you feel like, oh, maybe I got here by chance. I do feel these things regularly, and you feel vulnerable. But I remember I spoke to somebody in WAST, and there's one thing they said that I will always remember. They said about you, as higher you go in your position, your vulnerability is more, because the vulnerability of accountability, the vulnerability of public money. And it's actually Liam who said that. And I will always remember that, because I feel I will always have that at my heart, the accountability and the responsibility you have of that public money, investing it in patient care. Thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to respond.
Thanks, Rasha. Well, we'll open it up to questions in a moment. Can I just say a couple of things? First of all, I mean, firstly, I can completely understand you feeling a bit nervous coming into this group. You would never have known it. That was fantastic. So thank you so much. And imposter syndrome is something that we all suffer from, believe me. I'm just really interesting, and it's a delight, isn't it, that it's natural to think that graduate opportunities would be for people in their kind of 20s or less or around. But with retirement ages being pushed further and further into the dim distance, 47 is nowhere, years ahead. So it's great to see you here. So thank you for coming today, and it's been absolutely fascinating. But let's see what people may have. A rush of hands going up. What we'll do. I'm going to, Bethan's hand's not up just a minute, but I'm sure it will be in due course. So what I'm going to do is just, rather than worry about the sequence of hands going up, we'll just go round the table in a kind of a clockwise direction. And as we come to people, we'll see what they say, which means, Andy, you're going to be first.
Super. Thank you, Rosa. Fabulous presentation.
Thank you.
Quite inspirational, genuinely was. I'd be really interested, not necessarily for today, but a conversation about representation within my profession. We are massively underrepresented by people that aren't white within paramedicine. So I've been welcoming a conversation, if we could, at some stage, just in terms of how do we start to address that now? What influence I can have on doing it.
Just to add on to that, for my dissertation, my topic is why not WAST, and I've just kept it very simple, because I want to know why people are not coming into the workforce here. Excuse me. And I believe it's internal and actually external. I think there's also an issue in the community. So this is a research project I'll be doing. I might reach out to some of you for help, and I'll see what we get out from it. Maybe there might be some advice and suggestions to help you.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So moving around, just let us catch my eye if you.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question, but broader. So I'm so glad that your research is in that space. So I'm going to ask a slightly different one. So if you could imagine the most amazing sort of position you got to have the influence in the areas that you want to influence the most, what would that look like? What would it be?
So outside this role, I
Any
yeah.
role in the world?
Outside this role, I engage with a lot of people who are probably similar like me, but always we feel like spaces are not for us. And I really want to empower women, especially from diverse backgrounds, to come forward. Like you said, I am in a cohort and they're all like mid-20s, but and to break that sort of stereotype and just to be an example, I want to inspire other women to come into leadership roles, because I think coming into leadership is difficult for anyone. When you're a woman, it's more, and when you're from diverse background, it's even more.
I absolutely agree. Just to say, I'm on the board of the Nursing Midwifery Council, and so when I'm in that location, it's almost a flip of the experience you're seeing. So I'm seeing a very big mix of ethnicity, which is so pleasing to see. So I suppose in some respects kind of experiencing in reverse, but not in a negative way, in a very positive way. So just
that's the thing, across most health boards it is quite diverse, but it's just the ambulance sector. And for my dissertation, I've done a little bit of brief research, and even in New York, the ambulance sector, the diversity is very low. So it's just making me think, like, why is emergency care not for that? That's why I'm thinking, is it an external issue and not an internal issue?
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Okay.
Oh, thanks, Rusna. That was really insightful. So I guess based on your experience of WAST to date, what do you think WAST does well, and what do you think WAST could do better?
From my experience, since I've started this grad program, I feel everybody that I've come across, they're very welcoming to a grad trainee. It's almost as if they hold your hand and you get that sense of golden ticket. I feel like they treat you to bring you under your wing. And I think that's a really positive thing for a graduate, because you're coming in, you're very nervous, and you've never been in such a senior sort of working environment. It doesn't matter where you come from, but when you're a graduate. So for me, that's definitely been a positive, where that openness and where you don't feel like you're a hindrance. Sometimes when people come on placement or work experience, you feel like you're standing there, you don't know what to do. But I haven't felt that. I feel like in every place I've been to, people have welcomed me, and that's definitely a positive thing. In terms of what we can improve on, is for me, it's about the lack of diversity. I just feel like it can be more. WAST since I've been here, it's been 15 months. WAST is a great organisation. People are very lenient, and I feel it's such a good place to be, because I've worked in an Iron Bevan as well, so I can compare. And I feel it's such a shame people from different communities are not coming in with the flexible working, especially the call centre. If you're a mum, there's so many avenues to work in. It's not just paramedics. There are lots of other job roles within this organisation. So I think that's what we can improve on.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on round.
Yeah, just briefly, I just comment to wider board rather than a question, Brisna. We've talked a few times over the time, but just to share, one of the critical things that we're doing at the moment with the ambulance performance framework and the core organisation changes, Brisna is sitting right in the centre of the evaluation work and working with ourselves and the universities to make sure that we get that evaluation absolutely right. And I think one of the things I'm really pleased about is everything we've heard as Rishna's personal motivations will ensure that as we take that independent evaluation forward, we are doing it for the whole of the community of Wales, and we are having all of the things that we need to have. So I think just in all of the wonderful work you're doing, Rishna, I know that the board are particularly excited on that, and I'm sure they'll be reassured that you're a part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, moving round the table, Johnny.
Yeah, thank you, Russell. First off, thank you just for showing that bit of vulnerability in this session as well. Just on the imposter syndrome, I have it every day, so honestly, don't worry. Look, I know we've got to catch up in a couple of weeks, so just on the profession side, certainly with my BCS cap on, I'd love to pick a conversation with you around how we make that easier from a digital profession. Me and the team had a great session 2 days ago, actually, on human-centered design, so how we open that up to really hearing people rather than just listening to people. I'd be really interested in how do you think we will know when people with lived experience have seen a change? How do you think we'll hear that as a board, or how do you think we should hear that? And that might be something you want to reflect on. If you don't want to answer now, that's
I think,
perfect.
I think is this from like patient perspective or staff perspective?
From staff or patient, how do you think people with those lived experiences, if we put some of these changes in place, how do you think they will feel that? How do you think they'll feed that back into us?
Yeah, I think when you do the changes, I would say definitely engage. I know you're asking me how you will know, but I think before the how is to engage the communities that is suitable for them. Sometimes designs are done and maybe might not be suitable for the communities. It might be for a certain community and you think it's okay. But I'm only saying this because of the third sector role I work in. There's a lot of digital inclusion amongst elderly people from diverse background. They don't just have language barrier, they have IT barrier. And then many times the families, they're busy and those are the people that really do struggle in accessing digital health. So, and I think when you see a difference in those people that they can access those services without difficulties, that I think will, for me, that would be like, then we've met it, we've met the target.
Brilliant, thank you.
Good, just going around. Yeah.
Hi, Richard. Thanks ever so much. I mean, I think what struck me is how busy you are. But a bit like me having a kind of a wide portfolio, I think it is good to get involved in different sectors, be that third sector. So you've got a university, you've got Newport Live. So you must have picked up quite a lot of good practice elsewhere. That's the advantage, I think, isn't it, in having varied roles? You can see the good and the bad. I know you've got another emergency service there, and I wonder whether, because I was in policing for a while, and I think the challenge of a diverse recruitment might be an emergency service thing as well, as not just restricted to ambulance. So, but I just wonder, how much have you been able to pick up from good practice in your other roles that you've been able to apply here?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's absolutely true. You can share good practice, and an example is when I was working in OD with Sarah, I was able to link her with somebody in with the police because they were doing their strategy as well, and it's definitely a blue light thing in terms of diversity, and they're struggling as well, and they also have cultural issues like we do, maybe obviously probably more in the police. So yes, you can share good practice, you can connect people. And sometimes what I've learned through this role, which I forgot to mention, when I first came in, I was given a task to contact all health boards and learn about what they do in terms of development for staff or staff going into leadership. And I was told that maybe some may open, some may not, and they may not share. But to my surprise, every single OD team I spoke to, they were open-hearted, they were sharing, they were really happy. And what I learned from that was actually health boards want to talk to each other, but sometimes we don't want to talk to another health board. Is it because they might know our weaknesses or they might not tell us? But if anything, you share good practice, and that's something I'm definitely an advocate of.
Great. Okay, just moving on around. Right. Okay, so Estelle. Oh, I'm so sorry. I gave you a nanosecond to catch my eye, and you didn't do it.
I'm not quick enough.
No.
Thank you so much for coming. And I particularly appreciate the work that you've been doing with the Beam Network. So my question is about the Beam Network and about the stories that your colleagues talk about, because it's a great opportunity to share lived experience in a supportive space. What do you think, colleagues, if you had to articulate colleagues from the overall Beam Network, what do you think would be the one or two things that they would like WAST to change internally that would make them feel that they belong, more included? And as you described, creating the spaces for people like me, that was the words you used. What would they say?
So when I came into the Beam Network, it wasn't as active, and the morale was a little bit low, and I think that was because not feeling valued. But from the events we've done, and it's really important that senior leadership, they support us and they attend these sessions, because it gives that sort of credibility to us that we are doing the right thing. And I think by those events, what's happened is where there was that low morale, that morale boosted, and that sense of feeling valued has happened. And I've seen it in a work colleague where they're much happier. When I first started the Beam Network, there was a lot of complaining and disheartedness, but now very happy, smiling and feeling valued and feeling heard. And I think that's what these networks are.
Right, so Estelle.
Thanks, Chair. Rushna and I know each other quite well, and I will just say she didn't put on the slide, but she's also a fabulous cook. Right? So there's no end to it. No end to her talent. And Rushna might not have seen this, but on the agenda later on, I've got a paper about our kind of positioning around our engagement work as we move forward. And one of the things I'd be really keen to talk to you about, and I'm sure Liam's team would be as well in terms of community involvement, is all those things we just talked about how do we diversify our workforce? How do we make it more appealing? Do we really understand what's going on in communities? That's the barrier. And as you said, is it an external factor or an internal factor? I think those are really important things for us as we move forward about how do we engage with communities. How do we break down some of their stereotypes and how do we break down our stereotypes so we can kind of bring that holistic thing together? So in the paper later on, I'll talk about, we need to, if you like, in a bizarre way, narrow but broaden what we do, if you see what I mean, focus on the things that are really going to make the boat go faster through engagement. And this might be one kind of undercurrent that runs through all of that work about whenever we're engaging on anything, how are we making sure that we're listening to voices from all of our communities? And do we really understand, because we think we understand and we know that you shine the light into different corners that we simply don't understand, and you do, and you help us connect with those communities. And Angela's on screen here. Angela and I have been having a sideways conversation this morning about how we listen to patient voice through the changes that we've now got underway, and how do we make sure that what we're doing, we're in both longitudinally through the evaluation work that we've got going on and in real time listen to patient voice. And I think we've got that same opportunity here to work with our broadest of communities to hear. So Rushna and I will hopefully catch up over one of Rushna's tasty snacks to discuss these things further, but just wanted to say what a fantastic contribution you've made in those 15 months, and you need not have that imposter syndrome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Estelle. And Vishak, there you go.
Okay, I'll keep mine very short. I want to first say thank you so much for being so open about your experience and the work you have done through the BEAM network. And when you were talking, I felt it. It's a network that makes people feel belonged. And the question I wanted to ask you, our chief executive have asked that question, but I would just say, I see your story as a clear message to us as a board, that we need to move from listening and praising the network to backing it properly with actions, resources, and accountability. Because if we back this network, we talk about diversity, we talk about that we are struggling with this, but I believe if even the people of color that we have in our organization are backed and they feel belonged, they preach this message out. They talk to their community about Welsh Ambulance Service. So it is right time for us to back this BEAM network with action, resources, and accountability. That will be my contribution.
Thank you, Vishak, very much. Bethan, can I just make contact with you? You're on the screen. I want to make you feel you're part of us, even though you're not here physically. Was there anything you wanted to just comment on before we move on?
Thank you, Chair. Bore da pawb. The reason my hand didn't shoot up, Chair, which you recognised at the start, is because I can't find my raise a hand icon on this Teams channel at the moment. And I can see Angela is shaking her head, so there must be something consistent going on. However, any questions I would have asked, they've been asked by colleagues. So I would just like to add my thanks, really, Rushna, to you for coming today, because hearing stories from our staff is so important to us. It helps us drive forward the types of improvements that we need to continue to make. So diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Chair, for coming to me.
No, thank you, Bethan. And with that knowledge that you can't do the hands up, just make sure you give a good strong wave. And if I don't see it, I know one of my colleagues here will. So we'll bring you in whenever. But good. I can't imagine a board meeting without Bethan contributing. So excellent. Just looking around the table, just in case anybody has any sort of secondary questions or whatever to go, because that's been fantastic. Yes, Angela.
Just to summarise really, and just to say heartfelt thanks. Without your contribution and your energy, I genuinely believe that the Beam network would not be flourishing as it is now. Just to come to Ms. Shack's point, which is absolutely valid, our intention this year is to utilise our Beam network to help us co-create some of the responses to some of our policies. It is not just a network. It is a network for belonging, but it's also a network that we need to be helping us drive change. So thank you so much.
Good. Okay. Thanks very much. It was interesting you were talking about how far apart we are from London, and Angela and I were at an anti-racist seminar yesterday held by Welsh Government and in Cardiff, and one of the groups that I attended, which is interesting because it was actually a housing association presentation. The chief executive of the I think they're called the Cardiff Housing Association, Community Housing. That's a Cardiff Community Housing Association. She is a second generation Muslim, born and brought up in Cardiff. So it's interesting that it is happening. That gradually we are seeing second generation people growing. And she's as an accountant. Moved through her career to become a chief executive and has made a fantastic movement in that organisation, particularly in terms of broadening the ability to recognise and to sympathise with all sorts of issues that the people will have from different races and different religions and things like that, being able to offer support in terms of celebrating important events other than Christmas, for example. So it is happening, but recognising we're a long way behind London. So thank you very much for your attendance today. It's been really, really, really useful and really interesting. And we wish you very well in your journey.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
To my next Beam network.
Yeah.
Food.
Yes.
Okay, so just moving on, still in the same item, I think, Liam, you're going to give us a quick follow-up on the patient story from the previous meeting.
Just as my train, do apologise, Chair. So this is Mr. Just basically nothing particular to say on this one, Chair. We're continuing to do a lot of work. The fish driver diagrams that we normally present are available, so I probably wouldn't comment any further. Thank you.
Good. Okay. In that case, we will move on to item number 9, and we're going to talk about the actions that we take to mitigate avoidable harm, which no doubt will bring us back, at least in part, to the W45. But Rachel, I think it's your paper.
It is. Often Jason took it, so sorry. I was yeah. No.
Sorry if I caught you out.
No, yes, slightly. I mean, often my team always write it, but
Yes.
No, that's absolutely fine. Sorry. Apologies. So yes. So I think perhaps just to start by saying I think we are having a conversation as an executive team about and myself with Emma about whether potentially this report is needed. We know that many of these issues are covered in the MIQPR and in issues that are raised through AAAs from the committees, particularly in terms of when we're reviewing our metrics and potentially getting a kind of set of metrics that is a one set that this board will look at. Potentially this report may not be needed. So, but having said that, we know that it came from a place, didn't we, where we were, as an organisation, extremely worried about levels of avoidable harm some years ago now. And that harm has continued, and it has, although it may be lessening, there is still a long way to go before, as an organisation, we could be kind of confident that there wasn't that high level of avoidable harm. So, there is some good news in the report, as you will see, and is, as I say, also in the MIQPR. So since we've been on our journey with our new, with the clinical model transformation and with our new ambulance performance framework, first phase of which went live in July, we have seen patient cancellations drop very significantly. And this is because we are quickly kind of bringing some patients back. We are quickly assessing them, providing them with alternatives so they feel safer, I suppose, that they can stay with us until such time as we've gone through what they need. And we know that was one of the areas of harm that we were very worried about. And it's not in the paper, but just to to note that I was at a meeting earlier this week where we were talking about falls specifically, and we've been sharing data on falls with Health Board colleagues, with Welsh Government. And what that is showing is that there has been a reduction in the number of fallers who are self-presenting to EDs. And that is, as a result of the fact that patients are not cancelling their call with us, we are getting to them, and we are then taking those appropriate patients who need to go to an ED via emergency ambulance or other transport. So that is a much more appropriate and safer patient journey than patients trying to make their own way with families, etc. So there is some good news, I think, particularly around the patient cancellations. We've also seen, and this has been for a few months now, that we're able to safely close a number of calls remotely. So that's nearly up to 20%. And you can really see a step change in that graph, which is an impact of the changes that we've made in our clinical model. We have seen an increase in the numbers of patients who are being conveyed to emergency departments, and this links a little bit with the conversation we had earlier. And whilst I think there are some questions that health boards are raising around that, it links to the point that as handover delays are going down, as patient cancellations are going down, we are getting to see more patients appropriately. So that unmet need is reducing. We're getting to see patients, and therefore, proportionately, there are some more patients who are going to ED. And chief executives in health boards have asked for a little bit of what's the story, I suppose, what's the narrative that explains this to them? Because simplistically, some of the health boards are saying, well, our hospital handover delays have reduced. We're not necessarily seeing as much of a reduction in community wait as we wanted, but of course, we are more appropriately caring for a greater number of their patients. So I think, and there's still a long way to go on hospital handover delays, actually. So I think there's definitely some real pieces of good news in here. Having said that, as Emma mentioned earlier, whilst hospital handover delays have gone down, there are some parts of Wales where they haven't materially, and we know that those waits are likely to lead to potentially severe harm for patients who are in back of ambulance for extended periods of time. This paper does also just, I suppose, give you a little bit of a flavour of all the work that we're doing, particularly over the winter periods, because obviously we know demand tends to go up. Patients, often elderly people are iller. So there's additional actions that we take kind of through the winter to really mitigate some of that particular seasonal issue. But hopefully we can see some green shoots, but understand that there is still a long way to go. And of course, our phase 2 is going to be part of that, but the ongoing clinical model transformation work will continue over the rest of this year and into next, which will also see improvements. I can see Andy has got on his screen here, and I should have brought out the ROSC rates, so we can see that key clinical indicator for outcomes is also slightly trending upwards. It is still variable, it's small numbers each month, but we can see that real improvement. And of course, long way to go, as we said, Netherlands, other countries where we see much higher rates, but we're again on hopefully the right trajectory there. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add, one of the conversations we've had in the executive team now is whether or not we need to relook at the risks, particularly 223 and 224, just because actually they largely are around handover delays. And actually, whilst we recognise we haven't had a consistent improvement, we've still got the best performance we've had in 4 years. So there's a bit for me around the lens of, yes, there's more to do, but if we're saying we're 37% better in terms of handovers, we should be reflecting that in our risk profile. My view around risk is it's very dynamic. So if actually we did that 1 month and the next month everybody bombed and it was awful again, well, that's you just keep moderating and changing the risk. So I'm trying to encourage the execs to really think about looking at the detail behind the risks and treating them dynamically. I think my sense is any board that has risks that have been static for 4 or 5 years with no amendments it almost become a tolerated risk as opposed to something that you're live and you're trying to manage. So we might see in a future board meeting some of these risks changing.
Thanks, Emma. And of course, this paper came out of a comment that was made a couple of years ago in an assessment about just a warning that the trust could become sort of immune to long handover delays. And the fact that we're now seeing handover delays roughly half what they were, from 26,000 down to sort of 7 or 8.
And we're absolutely seeing the link between where we've got health boards where they're effectively complying with sort of around 45 minutes. The number of amber patients that we're seeing is absolutely huge. It's in its thousands. So actually, we can't ignore that we are reducing harm. Doesn't mean we've negated it, but in some places there is a reduction of harm.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Rachel. So we'll take questions. Various hands up here in a minute. Let's go to the screen first because we've got Bethan's hand. Bit of interesting imagery here, Bethan. When you put your hand up like that, it's bigger than your head. But we'll go to Bethan, then we'll go to Angela because she also had a hand up, and then we'll come into the room. Okay. So Bethan, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. To add a little bit to what's already been said, I think there are lots of positives in here, but it also very clearly displays there's a long way to go. So in October, 324 people did come to severe harm outside emergency departments. That clearly is as unacceptable. And the number of handover delays, whilst they are reducing significantly to where they've been, they are double what we set ourselves up for in terms of capacity and rostering. So in line with that, we are still going to see lots of people come into avoidable harm because of this. The one comment I wanted to add before I ask a question, please, was we did discuss this risk at Quest, obviously, quite recently, and it is documented in the AAA report that I'll cover off later in the meeting. However, part of that discussion was around that at the next round of reviews, we will centre on whether any reductions in handover delays should also translate into the reduction in the risk score, which is what the Chief Exec has just said, really. So we're very alive to that at Quest. My question is a general question. Are we ready for phase 2 next week? Because that's crucial for us, isn't it? How ready are we, please?
You want to start that?
Yeah,
delegated?
I'll start that. We are ready. We had an executive team meeting yesterday, and we asked Lee specifically that question. I mean, he's not leading this initiative on his own, and he gave us assurance that yes, we were ready. But I'll invite Andy and Liam to also add anything you might want to around are we ready? But yes is my response.
Yes, it would be my response as well. But we do have a number of key checkpoints still to go through as we get nearer to the day, just as we had with phase 1. But essentially, it's a repeat of the process we did with phase 1, where there's a countdown with a number of checkpoints as we get closer, with the last checkpoint being the very morning of switch on when we potentially go live. So as yet, all on course. We should be ready. But like I said, the caveat being we've still some checkpoints that we go through as we go along.
Yeah, I will chip just so Bethan through Quest will inevitably have a follow-up question to me that comes from once we've gone live. And so just to give board assurance that once we have gone live, we've got all the processes in place that will ensure that we pick up on any near misses or any incidents that occur, and we apply that learning rapidly to secure safe delivery going forward.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks, Bethan. So moving to Angela.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for noticing my hand. So I'd like to see this report stay. I think it shows transparency, and I think it's really important. What I would say is that we need to recognise that some members of the public are making their own way to emergency departments because of that. The history of if I call an ambulance, the situation is challenging, that it won't come. So I'm just going to make my own way rather than get into that situation. But we can see the performance framework is starting to make a difference, isn't it? All the reports are showing it's going in the right directions, although we'd like to see it speed up a little bit, but it's going in the right direction. So I think that public comms that I know you are putting out is really important so the public can see the situation is improving to instill public trust. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I think I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think whether we keep this report or not, the information will definitely be contained.
absolutely.
It might be contained in a different place rather than a standalone, but completely gather and understand what you're saying and appreciate that. Okay, so we'll come into the room. I think again, let's just go around the table because a whole host of hands went up. So just starting with Anne, just catch my eye if anybody wanted to. Rhiannon. Well, let's go around the table. It's easier, isn't it? Yeah.
So mine was just around what in terms of the amber ones and the increase there in terms of conveyancing. Did we model for that? Did we know that that was a likely kind of outcome of the changes being made? And are we needing to adjust things as a result of that when we're, imminent with the plans with phase 2? I just wondered that question.
Yeah, so the last modelling that we did on ORH, who are the company we use for a lot of our kind of sophisticated modelling, that is precisely what we did. So we understood that there was a massive unmet need, and we modelled through what starts to happen as handovers come down, and we then go to more patients appropriately. And then we think through that modelling, what then happens as we start to turn on more and more parts of our clinical model transformation, as we increase capacity in our remote space, as we increase alternative types of response in the community, whether that's advanced practice or mental health. So yeah, all of that is understood, I think, by us. I think probably the point I was making earlier is that potentially that narrative isn't as well understood in other parts of the system, and certainly the chief execs who were talking earlier this week.
I'm specifically asked the impact, the conveyancing element. Did you know that we knew that? Right? Okay. Okay. And is there anything we need to do differently kind of right now in terms of that knowledge of that increase in terms of phase 2? That was my other bit.
Well, I don't know, that kind of links to what Andy's working on. I think that we talked about earlier.
Essentially, what this comes down to, what I hope we'd see the shift in as we're going to phase 2 is following those patients being through RICS and being, clinically navigated as saying, yes, this response was appropriate. Now, previous that was response appropriate would be send an ambulance. Now that response appropriate might be what response. And that's the key thing that's going to come out with phase 2 of, rather than just, yes, we need a face-to-face assessment. It's more the nuance of what's the time in which we need to get that face-to-face assessment done, what's the purpose we need to achieve by that face-to-face assessment, and what's the skill set of the individual I need to send. So rather than it just being the default being we'll send an ambulance, now it's what do I need to send, how quickly do I need to send it, and what's my expected outcome from that clinician when I've sent them.
Yeah, I mean, that is understood, but I just wondered if there's anything specific from just the increase that is there anything we need to do differently? But
Not
it's
really,
just basically getting more into the nuance and more understanding. Sorry to labour the point, but just,
It is really important that our clinical model transformation programme isn't just about when capturing a performance framework is a kind of slightly separate bit. The model transformation is all about a better response in the community to people who've got different needs, and a better linking with health boards. And so one thing we haven't mentioned today in relation to this is that each of the health boards, I think 6 of the 7 have now got a single point of access. We are linking in very closely with them so that either on scene clinicians or our remote clinicians can talk to them about what are the pathways in this patch that you want to.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Ren. We will go around the table to take separate questions, but I know there are a couple of people who want to come in on this particular topic, which is, I think, you, Emma, and also Liam. So, Liam, do you want to go first, Emma? Or?
I am. So I think one of the things Andy and I have spoken about around that time purpose skill piece is when we look at what will be yellow and orange, so our new colours and green, will be that element of how much of that is in that can be done remotely, which is the piece that Liam is leading. And how much then can we do with a different skill set, not an EA, basically, responding to those individuals so that we continue to provide care closest to their home or their care home or wherever they are, noting that we want to really reduce conveyances which are inappropriate conveyances. I think long term, if we look sort of 4 or 5 years ahead, we might find that we're in a situation as a trust where we have fewer ambulance trucks because they're only going to the 15% purples and reds, but actually a larger cohort of other skilled individuals that are going out into the community and dealing with healthcare needs at home on the same day. And I think that would be potentially where we could be in 2-3 years' time if this works the way that we're predicting it would.
It just, I guess the bit of assurance I'd add on top is that in some part, us conveying more patients to hospital is a positive result of the things that we have been doing. So that means that we are getting to some of those patients, for example, that may be presenting with chest pain, stroke, with levels of frailty, multimorbidity in their aging years, that we're getting there in a timely fashion, which means that we are able to convey them to care in a timely fashion. And where time is a critical measure of their outcome, we should see more better outcomes for patients, but also more effective use of wider NHS services. And specifically in the frailty space, we know that has been of a real concern to people across the community, because they are in environments, whether at home or in external environments, where they feel quite vulnerable. So when our colleagues do make a decision to convey, I think, again, I would just kind of reinforce that decision will be clinically driven, and it will also be driven by the available services in the local area. And again, there is a correlation between conveyance rate and decision to convey and accessibility of available services to support people to stay at home. So I think there is a quality and safety lens, which is a positive lens for conveyance. And there is a service utilisation lens, which is if our people have access to good services wrapped around communities and neighbourhoods, then they will be better able to keep people in the environment which they're probably safest in.
Great. Thanks very much. So continuing, we'll just travel around the table to see whether there are any other questions on this paper. So yes,
Thank you, Chair. Just I'll pick up on a couple of points, and certainly on Liam about the quality. We're conveying the right patients, aren't we? So, Rachel, there's the bullet point on page 2 around Wait 45 expressed handover lost hours. We know, I think the latest figures I saw in November, it's likely to be about 14,000, so not so good. So we're chasing the 7,000. So for me, it's I'm really keen that we've got a clear narrative backed up by some core data around the benefits, of the reduction in the lost handover, because I think we are going to be under pressure. I think we already are, aren't we, from some of the health boards to explain that. So as we hopefully get nearer that, the 7,000, what's that clear narrative that we've got to say, yes, it's really making a difference to the patients, the number that we're reaching and the quality of the care. So it's a bit of a plea for me. Do you think we're going to have that sort of thing available? It comes back to the modelling question.
So we do have a draft kind of scorecards, which is specifically for the clinical model transformation. So that is looking at what are the benefits that we would expect to see, but also, triangulated with value and patient staff experiences, etc. as well. So we've pretty much agreed that as a draft, and the team, Johnny's team and my team, are trying to just pull together drafts now that sit underneath that. So yes, that's the aim, is that we have a better description of what are the benefits we expected to see, and then are we seeing those? And of course, the wider evaluation that we've commissioned, we'll look at that on a kind of longitudinal basis, but clearly internally we'll be looking at our own data a little more quickly.
Yeah, because it's an opportunity for us all, I think, to champion that on behalf of the trust, in our external stakeholders. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks, Jane. Moving around, yes, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure if some of this question I was going to ask has already been tackled, but as you said earlier on, you mentioned the fact that the conveyance rates are going up as a result of the crews being more available. Have we got any data from the health boards in regards to what was Angela mentioned regarding to sort of people self-presenting at A&Es? And is there a correlation in the reduction of that happening now, because we're now getting out to the crews? And the second question was in relation to the readiness for phase 2. Have we got what systems have we got in place now to ensure that the staff are actually equipped and it's safe for their stress levels, etc., please?
So just in terms of that first point, I mentioned earlier, so there are pockets of data where we are able to link. So Forbes is a really good example where they can see that the walk-ins have reduced as a result of the changes and us getting to more patients and bringing more callers in through our mechanisms. It's less easy. Chip in Andy's team did do a piece of work probably about a year ago now, which showed the opposite effect, which did seem to show some correlation. I think it particularly looked at Betsy, where as handovers were kind of going up, you could see walk-ins also going up, so there was a kind of correlation, although you can't, at that point, it wasn't a full data linkage. But I do have data. There's a dashboard which shows numbers of walk-ins to all of the EDs in Wales. I think that's probably a good piece of work to just look at, just from a correlation perspective. And of course, eventually, we'd hope to be having a proper data linkage, which allows us to say somebody's rung 999, they've cancelled the call. Where do they next pop up in the system? We can see they've gone to a walk-in in a So that's ideally where we want to get to, but we're a little bit away from that, I think, at the moment, aren't we? But hopefully get there soon. And then the second point I've was about readiness, wasn't it? So in terms of the checklist that we've got in terms of go live, one of the points in that is around staff readiness, the training. Have people had the training? Are they feeling comfortable? And as I understand it, those ticks are kind of in place. And as Liam mentioned, there will be really from kind of day one and for the 2 weeks following that, there will be a really significant presence in all of the sites where this is having an effect of leaders and managers to be there kind of immediately if issues are cropping up and people are worried or concerned. So I think we've covered it from a training and a staff perspective, but also then really being there immediately it goes live to make sure anybody who needs support, we're there for them. If there's anything you wanted to add in, or come and talk to us about it, Damon, if there's any worries you've got, then let me know.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Andy. It was very much relating Damon's question to Angela's comment, really. I think we've ground to make in terms of regaining that public confidence, the way we haven't been able to send timely responses before, simply because we haven't had no resource to send. As resources coming available, there's going to be time before we then start to see that the public confidence starts to be restored, so that when they ring 999, they can be confident there's going to be a response. The other thing in terms of the awkward bit about when we land in this is at the time when there's increased activity right across the whole of the system. So in terms of being able to say, what was it like compared to last month? It's going to be a real difficult comparison. We probably need to look at what was it like this time last year, as opposed to what was it like last month as we head into it. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Andy. So moving around the table, so yes, Johnny.
Thank you. Yeah, so just on the data sharing conversation, let me just cover off briefly where we are. I think it might be helpful, Chair. So we recently signed a data sharing agreement with DHCW. So this is for the NDR, so the National Data Repository. So the aim here would be to have all data going right from urgent emergency care, right through looking at deprivation data, right through to community care and everything in between, from ambulance to discharge and beyond. I think there's a few steps that we require some support from Welsh Government to get there. One of those is a change of legislation around how that data can be used. And the other one is a public engagement piece. So over the border in England, there is a national opt-out programme. So if you don't want your data to be used for anything other than direct care, you can opt out of that. We currently don't have that in Wales. So that is a regulatory barrier that we need to get through. So we have partook in the data sharing agreement part with DHCW, and we have fed this into Welsh Government. There's probably a good 18 months worth of work to get through, but absolutely, them is right. That is the holy grail that we do need to chase down. But I just don't want us to understate how much work is involved at a system level to get us to that point. But that is absolutely where we should be going.
Thanks, Johnny. Moving on, anybody else on this side of the table? No. And checking on the screen, no. I think, oh yes, Estelle.
Thanks, Chair. It was just to respond, as Andy has just said, to Angela's comment really about and picking up what I said earlier around engagement. We've put a lot of effort into the comms and recognising that this is phase 2 of the performance management framework, which is actually a Welsh Government initiative. It's not, it's not ours to change. But it's really important, I think, as we move forward with both the changes of the model and the framework, that we are capturing that patient experience, both in terms of data. So what does it look like around concerns? What does it look like around outcomes? But also, what does it feel like for people? Because actually, a lot of the negativity that comes is not actually about the care that was delivered at the end. It was that experience to get to that point. So again, Angela and I have been talking offline about how can CLICE have a role in that, in sharing what they are hearing from their kind of groups and the public more generally about how it's feeling. What are we getting from our own internal systems, and kind of extrapolating those two things, because sometimes the data and how it actually feels are two different things. And replacing the public, restoring the public confidence thing, a lot of the time is about how it feels. And so we need to just be alive to that kind of qualitative stuff as well as the sort of data-driven stuff.
Okay, thanks, Estelle. Checking the screens, checking around the table. I think we've probably asked everything we need to on this paper. From a governance point of view, there are 5 different specific things we've been asked to note. I think we have covered all of those during the course of this discussion, so I don't propose to kind of labour that point. We have duly noted all of those there. The only final comment I would make is that on the conversation, which is often around health inequalities, one of the things that does seem to be emerging here is a wider inequality about ambulance delays across Wales, which we note. And one of the things specifically you were asked to note was the help that we can give health boards to try and bring about W40. I know you're working on it. Yeah. But we are seeing now, we've always had one health board that was sort of shone quite a bright light. Now we've got several, but not all. So the inequalities is in strange ways have actually got a bit worse. Okay, let us move on then to item number 10, which is about risk and risk appetite, which connects to what you were saying to some extent, Emma, about perhaps being more dynamic in terms of risk, but this is about risk appetite specifically. So over to Trish.
Thanks, Chair. So I'll take risk appetite second. I just wanted to sort of talk a little bit about the risks that we've got here. So as you'll see, they've all been reviewed. Finance Performance Committee, Quest and People and Culture Committee all had some really good discussions on risk, as you'll see from the AAA, and no doubt the chairs will come in when they present their AAAs on this or during this report. I think that, as you'll see as well, if you're part of those committees, the agenda is driven by those risks and it actually runs all the way through as it normally does. ARAC next week will have the overarching risk program on their agenda, as well as the risk appetite statements. You'll see there's not much movement in these big risks bi-monthly. But what we've added in here at Annex 5 is trending data. So you can actually see over time, although it may seem that there is not much movement in these big risks, there has been quite a bit of movement right across the board. But we are looking at, again, in ELT at risks in the round, and we've had the discussion on 223 and 224 by Emma and Beth, and I won't rehearse that, but we'll certainly have a focus on that when it comes in again as to whether there's any potential changes to those, because they've been stuck at 25 for some time. We've also reprofiled risk 201, which is a reputational risk, and split that into 2. Which better articulates the risk to the relationships of stakeholders, and then the poor patient experience affecting our reputation. And that's also mirrored in Estelle's paper later on reputation. So you've got the headlines there. We'll bring the full risk through in due course, and it will sit here with the board rather than at a committee, because it sits better here right across than actually sitting within a committee. The other thing, last thing on actual risks is risk 139, which is the risk to meeting our financial statutory duties. We kept it on the risk register, but we dropped the risk score right down to target. We are going to have a look at that given the challenging financial situation. So you should expect that to be reviewed next time it comes around. So just on to risk appetite statements. Thank you for your engagement in the 2 board development sessions where we developed these, and thank you to Julie for pulling these together. This is the first time we've had such comprehensive risk appetite statements. We've got 6 strategic objectives in a long-term strategy, but 7 risk appetite statements. They're here for approval. We'll obviously revisit them annually, if not before, so they'll come back as and when. The majority have an open risk appetite. So that is that we are keen to embrace higher risks in pursuit of achieving higher returns, actively seeking opportunities, and open to exploring innovative solutions. Robust risk management practice in place to manage potential risks. So the majority are open. As you would expect, we've got a keen risk appetite for being at the forefront of innovation and technology. And so that's an appetite to embrace higher risks, as you would expect in that area. We've split risk appetite for strategic objective 6, which is value and sustainability. So we've kept a core risk appetite around financial probity and performance and sustainability and statutory duties, but are open around those commercial innovation, value and sustainability items. So I think, as you'll see, we've tailored each of the risk appetite statements to our strategic objectives, so they're a bit more meaningful, and you'll see that at paragraph 11. But lastly, I think risk appetites are most powerful when they're more than just words, and I think that that's the key here. So whilst it's fairly straightforward to be using risk appetite to score risks or see when we're intolerant or to manage or mitigate, the real power here is when we actually apply them in decision making. So the ARAC, not next week, but the week after, the meeting after, we're going to explore how we might actually embed them in our practices rather than them just being to score risk. And I think the timing is really good as we start to look at our strategy again and how we might be delegating authority to make decisions centered around our risk appetite. So we've got quite a long way to go in that, but it's an exciting journey if we decide that we'll use them not just to score, but actually to make decisions. So, leave it there. Thanks.
Okay, grand. Thank you very much, Trish. So open up to any questions in the room. Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Trish. No, I'd just like to endorse that. I guess my question, and coming up, the 223 and 224, and following on from Emma's point, I know when you and your team have done a fair bit of work just trying to untangle, if you like, those factors outside of our control against those that are within our control, notwithstanding that the overall still might be 25. But we're not seeing that here, Trish. Is that because it's still work in progress? It's not been kind of ditched, that work? Because it is quite important just so we can get a handle on, the exactly defining those, those actions that are entirely within our gift and those which aren't. Yeah. So I guess that's still progressing.
So we've made a start on that. So whilst we haven't split score, so we've still got an all-encompassing score, we have started to articulate better what's in and out of our control and started to theme that. So I think that's the next stage. If we are going to reduce it, are we reducing it on what is in our control or overall? And I suspect it's the latter. Yeah. But we are still pulling out in a bit more detail in this risk what we can control. So we're not going to lose that because I think the decarb risk is the same. Yeah. So we want to continue that along. It's just how we portray it, particularly in the score, because I think there really is something in reducing a score when we need to. Yeah. And we know that a similar risk in the JCC has reduced as well. Yeah. So just trying to align with that and make sure that we're bringing that through with the appropriate mitigations.
Thank you.
Okay, Brianna?
Yeah, just a...
No, go on.
Sure, please. Just a couple of points. So I totally support the sense of risk is dynamic, absolutely. But the other element to that is making sure the alignment with the work we do on the MIQPR, that we've got what's normal variation, what's not normal variation, because actually I suspect a lot of what we're really looking at in our risk lens, particularly around those kind of intractable, they're actually issues, not risks. They're already realised. So I think there is something in that. Are we really articulating and capturing what's a risk? Yeah. Because I'm not sure how we handle issues in that context. The other thing for me, I think it's an opportunity, shall I put it that way, in the SO2, enabling our people to be the best they can, where we talk about the context, I'd really like to see fostering a positive culture and anti-racist organisational position. because I just think that that is bold, and I'm not saying that based on the conversation earlier. I actually spotted it when I was doing my pre-reading. I just think there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, thanks. Annette, sorry.
Yeah, just to come back on that, when I think about risk, I have lots of conversations with people around that's an issue, it's not a risk. And actually it is really quite difficult in any organisation I've been, and I'm sure you've had the same, to separate the two out. But I'm very live to that, absolutely. I suppose the people committee could pick up the question about the other one. My question is, I really welcome risk appetites. I think they only work where they actually are utilised, and they're utilised for big, important decision making would be my lens. So on that basis, I'm grateful to hear that, you know, we might have these dynamically, we might recheck, are they right? Because when I look at the financial sustainability cautious, I am not suggesting we're not financially, you know, have great financial probity at all. But when I think about next financial year, what we might face, we actually might need to be less cautious around some of our financial decision making. So not necessarily discussion now, but I think just having assurance and reassurance that we will be looking at this. I would welcome finance and performance, particularly in the future when we look at that budget setting piece, actually looking at that from the perspective of we might need to take some more risks, is my point, next year, and not be overly cautious. Thank you.
I know Tricia wants to.
Yeah, I mean, certainly there was a number of permutations of wording, and I think just based on both those comments, once we've gone through ARAC and we're comfortable with how we're going to be embedding this, I think bringing it back, just not waiting a year, but bringing it back in, 4 or 5 months to say, does it still feel right? Because we've moved into a different zone, and this is how we're going to use them, I think would be really helpful. The more we're flexible with this, the better. For sure. So we can certainly bring that back.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. I just don't see any other hands up anymore. Oh, yes, I do. Yes, down the end. So Damon, and then we'll go to Money. But Damon?
Yeah, thanks. Just in relation to risk 558, just wondering, is there a timeline attached to the work to articulate this, the action to mitigate it?
Sorry, just let me check that one. Do you mean the actions?
Yeah, and in relation to the work that's being considered, is there a time frame in respect to the plan for the staff?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand, Damon.
I just assumed that there was a time frame attached to the plan because the work is underway to articulate it.
The mitigation. You're talking about the health and wellbeing.
Yes.
And did you want to come in on that?
Liz might want to, but we can both do it. I mean, underneath this, obviously, the next layer below will be all the mitigations and actions, and each individual action will have a time frame. So probably, Damon, that's the thing that I would suggest we need to look at.
Yeah,
we can share that back.
Yeah, I mean, we have been having conversations with Carl about actually getting the specificity on this, because it is visibility by the board of the actions to plug the gaps. And how they're proceeding, which is the important piece, because if the risk is staying stagnant, are they the right actions? And if you don't have that detail, then it's very difficult to give you assurance on that. So we've certainly had those conversations, and I know Julie's working with Liz and Carl to pull that out. So you've got that detail there. Sorry, Damon, I was having a senior moment.
I thought I was answering the wrong question as well. You threw me.
We got there in the end.
Yeah, thank you, David. Johnny.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just building on Emma's point on the finances for next year. I was just thinking it a bit in terms of SO3. So we've got a really keen risk appetite here around being at the forefront of innovation and technology. Now, that might drive us to have a front-loaded set of costs if we want to really get into some of this space. But I guess one thing I would ask us to keep questioning is around that benefits realisation. And I guess not losing sight of the efficiency gains that we can drive through that. The tech shouldn't be deployed just for tech's sake. Actually, there's a real benefit we can drive from that. So again, it's something that we'll need to make sure we balance off in terms of front-loaded costs. And actually, there's some really good efficiencies we can drag out of it from a finance side. So yeah, just to add on to that one.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back in on Johnny's point, I think that's why we came in on SO6B in terms of being open around that area, so that we could be a little bit more risky in terms of some of the decisions we made. Obviously, we didn't want to be too risky in terms of, obviously, we still need to balance the position next year, but looking at more commercial opportunities, how we can sort of, as you say, front load some of these to look into other opportunities going forward and income generation, etc. So yeah, that's why we've got the slight differentiation between those two.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks. Okay, so looking around, any more? I don't see any other hands up. Nobody's waving at me. So we've asked to actually approve a couple of things here. So from a governance point of view, let's just do that. We're asked to consider the report. We've done that. We're asked to approve the suite of 7 risk appetite statements. So looking around, we can approve those. Thank you. We note issue around audit and risk committee. We receive assurances, and then we asked to agree the reframed reputational risks that Trish was talking about, splitting 201 into the separate sort of stakeholder part and the patient part. So I'll be content to agree that. Okay, we are, and then note the ratings. Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody. So we're now due to have a coffee break, which we will do. We're 5 minutes ahead of schedule, so let's keep our 5 minutes gain. It's 10 past, so if we can meet back here at 25 minutes past and have our 15-minute coffee break. So be back at 25 past.
I was going to ask you, work at FPC.
Yes. Okay, everybody, thanks for coming back. We're still waiting for Damon, but we'll press on, and Stella, you're back with us. Right.
I'm back. Rumours of my demise are greatly exaggerated, Chair.
Okay, so that's grand. And just checking on the screen, we've got Bethan with us. Good, put a wave, and Angela's with us. Good, lovely, thank you. Right, so we're on item number 11, which is MIQPR. Which has Rachel's name assigned to it. So comes straight to you, Rachel, if you may.
Yeah, thanks. This was definitely mine. Yeah, and so thank you, Chair. As usual, I won't say a huge amount, particularly around the kind of EMS side of things. We cover that. We covered that in quite some depth in the previous paper, and completely agree with you about the point you made in response to Angela that, you know, even if we don't have that harm report, we'll need to make sure we bring out those levels of harm explicitly in this report as well in future. So I think sometimes what we do is just concentrate a little bit on some of the other parts of the organisation. So we see for our 111 service that we haven't been achieving our what we've traditionally had as a 5% abandonment rate target. And we do know that has an impact, you know, in the same way that people cancel their calls for 999. You know, if people don't get a great response, so that there's the potential for them to just tip up other parts of the system, as we see, as I say, for the callers of 999. So we do know that's an important issue to concentrate on. But the latest modelling really does show that actually with our current commissioned levels of call handlers, it is almost impossible to reach that level of 5%. So that's one of the conversations that we, as Emma mentioned, we had a good meeting with our JCC colleagues yesterday, and that will be one of the areas where we need to start talking to them now about, you know, what do we do to take that forward? What's the best that we can do within the resources we've got? Is there more we can do, for example, in the digital space to kind of move some demands through into the digital world and reduce telephony volume? So I think there's lots to do there, but we do always mention that we're not hitting 5% target, but we do need to recognise that actually that resource that we currently have from a call handling perspective is not sufficient to hit a 5% target. I think in terms of sickness levels, again, we kind of continue to see, I suppose, pretty good sickness levels. So we just think about some of our people indicators. And one of the conversations we've been having, I suppose, both in the executive team and with some of the NEDs earlier this week is, you know, how do we determine what's kind of good looks like in each of our indicators? How are we going to really tell whether we're kind of red, amber, green in terms of where we are? And sickness is a really good example, isn't it? Where do we realistically and feasibly think we ought to be? Yes, we're way better than we were during the COVID period and just after, but actually, where do we want to be? So good progress, but more to do, I think, on that one. So the other thing I was just going to pull out, I think, in terms of this particular, or the S bar, is that there's a graph in the S bar right at the end of it that I did think was quite useful, which is showing the totality of our 999 activity and what the outcome is in terms of those patients who ring 999. You know, whether they see the call is closed remotely, whether we treat them on scene, whether we're able to convey them to somewhere that's not an ED, whether they are conveyed to ED and whether they're cancelled. So you can start to see the movement there of certainly a reduction in the cancellation, but you can see an uptick then in the conveyed. But that I think is quite a nice visual picture of the outcomes of our clinical model, and what we want to see then is an increase also in our see and treat rates. So I'm not going to say much more on the actual data. Happy to take any questions, but Chair, just to, I suppose, to note in this forum that we are, as Emma mentioned earlier, doing a review of both what the metrics should be at a board level and at a committee level, but also what's the format that we want to see in terms of how that's reported, what's the format of the report itself, and how can we streamline and simplify that a little bit for both boards and committees. So that work is, some discussions have been ongoing, and we've got a further session, I think, in our board development in December, with a view then potentially coming back to board for some kind of approval of a new way of working in due course. So thanks to everybody for their input and thinking on that. But happy to take any questions then of any in terms of the metrics.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. So we'll go to that. I know Emma wants to come in, and I'm sure some others will as well. I would just add this, I forget, on the 111, it always seems to me that you've got so many moving parts. You've got the number of agents is obviously a critical factor. Particularly in terms of abandonment rates, but other things that change are the nature of the call, the length of the call. And actually, if we are seeing more calls coming in, you would expect that to have a negative impact on abandonment rate. And if the length of the call, because it's more complicated reasons for the call, that is also being experienced, then again, that will have a negative, because you're actually finding that your agents are spending longer on calls, and more volume coming through. So there's lots of things there which may well cause us to change that. And I always, I've seen it in a number of other areas where you have some of these targets, and when you actually track back, it's a bit like the 8-minute target. When you track back and try and work out where that came from, you find that somebody in the dark room just suddenly thought, you know what, 8 minutes seems about right. Maybe somebody in the dark room just thought 5% was about right. It'd be interesting to know, and it'd be interesting to have a look and see what other call centres, not just emergency service call centres, what they live with. But anyway, that's by the way. Anyway, Emma, shall we go to Emma first, and then we'll come across to Liam? Sorry, Liam, did you want to come in on that point?
I was just going to come in on that point, if I may.
Of course, yeah.
So you're absolutely right, Chair, that there are a lot of factors that influence call length, and volume and presentation, and all of those things are part of it. Specifically for 111, I think I just would reassure the board that there's a huge amount of analysis that goes on in terms of call composition. So colleagues will remember that we implemented a new call system for our call handlers. And actually what we've been able to do is actually be really clear about dispositions that come from those calls. So those calls that go to our clinicians are those that are most appropriate to go to our clinicians. And there is a system ask that we enhance the practice of our clinicians such that they are taking greater steps to self-service the patient in that moment, and to give that patient that single point of contact, or to ensure effective transfer to another service where it should occur. That latter point extends call length often, but it is in order that patients have a better experience and the system has more effective utilisation. We've talked quite a bit today about the opportunities that reside at the front end of patient contact. So Johnny's talked about the Albot. He's talked about how that sits on top of a Ranger system. So the work we're doing on the symptom checker that comes live in Q4, the opportunity to integrate more data into our system directly from central resources of DHCW. All of that helps us with the efficiency argument. So I just want to offer a bit of reassurance in the absence of Lee that actually there's an awful lot of work that clinically and operationally gets into the detail of call length and every opportunity to find an efficiency to try and close that gap within our gift is sought.
Excellent. And I wouldn't want to play down the importance of abandonment rate. It's a useful indicator, but I think there are lots of nuances to it. I mean, as a user of services, we've all seen this where you ring a call centre for some reason or other, and there's a voice that says you can probably deal with this by going on the website. So if I ring off and then go on the website, presumably I'm a call abandoned statistic within that organisation's reporting framework, but it's not because I've not had a good service, actually quite a good service, potentially. Anyway, a lot we could talk about, but don't want to delay it here. So questions. So Demis, do you want to come in next and then we'll go to Andy and go around?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of link this to the conversation we had about risk and Rhiannon, your comment about what's normal variance. So I think one of the things we really want to focus in the new version of the IMQPR is trying to integrate as far as we can SPC charts, which show them and give us a view as a board about what are the things we need to worry about versus this is just a normal variant. And I know Johnny and Rachel are looking at that in terms of the future report because it is something that NHS Wales wants to introduce. So it'd be great if we're ahead of the curve, and linked to that then will be that future projection of performance. So rather than it's always being a look back, where would we like it to be? And I think tracking with things like SPC helps us to nuance that as well. Thank you.
Okay, right. So to Andy, and then we'll see who else we can.
It was just to draw the board's attention to if you're on the electronic on our bags, it's slide 34, and it's just a very hidden away, for want of a better phrase, right at the very last slide. But it's a real fundamental, very much goes to the conversation we were having earlier. I'll let people get there, but it's the slide entitled Partnership System and Contribution, and it's the graph down in the bottom right there, and you'll see that blue line as the improvements in the handover has taken place. But look at the corresponding then with the number one instance. And so when we get into a lot of discussions around what's our AMBER performance in terms of response, but more critically, this shows the impact of having our ambulances free to respond, in that the amount of unmet need that's now being addressed because we've got a resource to send is clearly demonstrated in that one little graph that shows that big spike in activity in terms of the number of calls we're getting to. I just want to call that out because it is, it's a little old chart down at the bottom, but it's really quite a fundamental one.
And it's about 1,000. It's 1,000 patients in a month, and that's significant. Yeah,
it is. Okay. So Rhiannon, I think was next. Then we come around to Jane, and then we go around. We'll see what we get.
Yeah, thanks. Three things I just wanted to ask about. So there's obviously at point 12, as we've been talking about a lot today, so much emphasis and importance on the kind of remote skills. And I suppose I'm just curious to understand, not so much what I've heard already, the training is there for people who have put themselves forward, but this is a growth area. And I'm just wondering how much we're doing, what we need to do in terms of growing confidence that people are going to want to step into this space. It's a scary space to be in. It's not what you've been, trained to do, essentially. So I just wonder what we're doing about that. The other bit that particularly caught my attention was what can we hope for in terms of change with the PADR? Because I think the two are linked, actually. We aren't getting to that optimal 86% yet. I don't sit on the People Culture Committee, so I don't hear the conversations. So I think it's really important how, it's that real sense of being valued, isn't it? Having that important conversation. What's your opportunity to develop? What more can I do? All that. And my final one is in the people space as well. And I think I could see on the graph a slight uptick on the violence and aggression chart. And I just wanted to understand, is that about greater reporting, or does it look like there's an increasing incidence of violence?
Liam, I think probably. Do you want to come in on that first point?
So there's a significant amount of work going on and growing both confidence and competence and defining levels of practice as well. So at this point in time, over the last couple of months and into the next couple of months, a significant amount of time is going into ensuring our clinicians particularly, but also our call takers are prepared for the shift and changes that we're making. That's really important. And then what we've been doing is enhancing practice in a number of areas, and specifically, as an example, paediatric RSV, we did some additional training for that. And actually what that did was grow the confidence and competence not only of our clinicians in closing stuff within the 111 service, but actually also were able to take steps in the scripts and narratives that supported call takers. And that had quite a material impact actually on the wider system. So I think we're doing a lot of good work. We are just completed. You may be aware we've gone through some changes over the course of this year. Those changes are coming to an end, and we'll be really focusing the clinical leadership team for remote space into that over the coming months. Would you like me to pick up health and the violence and aggression? Yeah. So just in relation to violence and aggression, yes, we have seen an uptick. I think it's a mixture of both is the answer. So there is definitely improved confidence in reporting and improved confidence of our people that we will take steps to support them when incidents occur. As well as that, we have seen an uptick in the number of incidents that have been reported through our clinical contact centres in particular. So that is the area where there is work going on. We undertook a deep dive of that at the last Health and Safety Committee. And we are part of the All Wales Anti-Violence Collaborative, and we're doing some work with NHS Wales Shared Services to see what else we might be able to do together to reduce some of that risk. We did discuss that yesterday at the executive team, and just to finish on that point, the With Us, Not Against Us campaign that we generally run over the winter and seasonal period, we will want to focus that into this area, as you would expect.
Shall I take the PADR? We did talk about this at People and Culture Committee, because it was sort of drawn about, we still seem to be staying just below. So we've got some small pilots taking place in terms of we've revamped the PADR process, making it more accessible, feedback from staff and managers, and we're linking it to our WAST Way work. So obviously, as part of our WAST Way, we talk about essential conversations and the importance of checking in. What we're trying to do is make it so that the PADR doesn't just become this once a year big, huge, overwhelming process. So we've got two areas that we're going to be piloting the new approach from January to March. It'll be really interesting to see if we can see an uptake, one in ops and one in a corporate area. So just to give you that reassurance. And secondly to that, Andy at People and Culture Committee raised a really valid point in terms of, obviously our staff, particularly our clinical staff, are having ride-outs with SPs, etc. There's lots of clinical assessment happening, and it's how are we making sure we capture that at the end of the year as well. So just to reassure, we're not sitting here thinking this is okay. There is more to do. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Rhiannon. Yes, James.
Yeah, just two comments and one question from me. Just sort of picking up on Andy drawing our attention to the one chart. This sort of almost feels like it's buried on page 34 amongst others. I think that's a really good illustration, isn't it, of perhaps what we want to draw out and just enhance, because I think we also recognise the transparency in the data, but it's a huge, volume. And can we just use it a bit better in terms of that? And I think picking up on what Rachel said, we've started that work, I think, to really use it as an opportunity to sharpen our focus, I think, in terms of the performance and meet a number of needs, hopefully all with one individual pack. Just talking about just briefly about the tiers of reporting, can I just pull out by way of an example, really, the concerns response within 30 days, which the narrative is, I think, around paragraph 15, and it's on the main sheet for board. And there you can sort of see the trend, so it's improved because we've got 62%, but we're still off target at 75%. But I can't, and we have been for the last 2 years. But what I haven't got is any deeper understanding as to why, or whether or not are we likely to hit the 75. So I suppose the question for me is, as part of our work on MIQPR, we're going to look at some of these targets to make sure that they're realistic and stretching, really.
So I think what targets we're going to look at is still something that we're developing. We're very conscious about PTR, and I'll bring in Liam, and I'm quite sure this has been a topic of many conversations at Quest as well. So it might well be in our future performance framework that what we do is we carry on the work that we've got in committees where they're doing deep dives as to actually what's the recovery plan and then bring that through into the AAA. But Liam is doing a lot of work with the support of exec directors because it involves all of us around complaints, the resources are sort of operational, clinical, etc. There is more work to be done. We've absolutely recognised in the last few months that we're on a trajectory for improvement, but we're not there yet. So again, when we need to be. So we're using QMG, which is one of our quality groups, and ELT, Executive Leadership Team, to give the robust executive oversight. And then I think it comes through Quest. Liam.
Yeah, no, so thank you. So I think the specifically to PTR as an area where we've had a continuing challenge, I think there's three things that I have in my head as kind of milestones where we've seen challenge. So the first is that we ended up with significant demand coming into that service as a result of the increase in number of handover delays, our inability to respond. So we had a significant growth in the number of complaints and incidents that were coming through. We were starting to get that into a better position, and then we had the changes that we were making as a result of core categorization. And what we learned through that process is actually we've extended the investigation periods, because actually in order to do that effectively, there are more touch points, particularly in a remote space and in the early assessment space. And so that has really required us to work alongside operational colleagues and clinical colleagues, so in the clinical directorate, to think about how are we aligned as well as we could be. And then alongside that, going forward, we've got legislative changes that we've been responding to and that come into force on the 1st of April. And again, that's changing the nature both of what we will need to report on at a national level in terms of performance, but actually it's significantly changing the interventions that we're going to have to play into supporting people who make complaints and raise concerns. So I think there's kind of three in my time here. I agree with you. I don't seem to be able to get the trajectory of improvement I would like, but I also seem to have this constant kind of shift.
Yeah, there's an explanation, isn't there?
The assurance I would give is just to echo Emma's comments. We are doing a huge amount internal to the directorate to try and get to a point where we have a recovery plan. I can see Bethan's got a hand up. To get to the point where we've got a recovery plan that the organisation has full confidence in, because at this point in time, Quest have made it clear and executive leadership team have made it clear it needs to be strengthened. Some of that is in the areas that I've described, and Johnny and I have done a joint meeting because we think we can find some mechanisms for supporting the team through automation of some of the data flows, etc. as well. So that's all on the internal. The final comment I would make is that some of our performance is also driven by the external. So when we are talking about some of these more complicated litigations and complaints, there is the element which is within our control, and then there is the element that is within the control of the health board, because of course the pathway of care, the complaint never comes in only about us. The complaint often comes in about the episode of care, and that requires us to work under joint investigation framework for health boards and ourselves to get an appropriate response. So some of the performance is absolutely in our gift, and I need to own that. But some of the performance is out with our gift because there's complexity, and once you get into the redress, that also then can cause delays as well. So there's a number of things in there that influence performance and reporting in that space.
Can I just come back because I think where I was coming from, because this is absolutely, and I know Quest are all over this, I think it's just an illustration as going forward in terms of that is probably a really good indicator that's best dealt with in committee, and then is potentially, as you know, once we're clear on the parameters, could be escalated to board through AAA or whatever. So I was coming at that more as an illustrative example of what we might want in the future. But I know, apologies, Beth, I didn't want to be treading on your toes at all in terms of that, because I know Quest are very much on top of this.
Bethan, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Just ever so briefly. I mean, I had some of these notes ready for my AAA report later, because all the detail is documented within there. Liam's covered the majority. There's just one or two things I'd like to add, please. The first thing, other than the general comment to not just Jane, but all board members, we spend an awful lot of time at Quest discussing this particular area. It is an ongoing concern. And as you've said, we've not hit that target for the last 15 months. So it is an area that we continue to look at. We have recently identified and provided an extra £155,000 of non-recurring funding, which comes to an end in March next year, to try and support the teams, to try to address some of the the delays and the challenges they're currently dealing with. And the second point that I wanted to add to Liam's comment was that the committee members, Quest committee members, did request at the last meeting that in the next update that we receive, because we have an update on this in every meeting, that we want more detail around the improvement trajectory that's likely to be realistic. And also, secondly, the executive confidence in terms of their confidence levels around the potential for recovery and the long-term sustainability of that recovery. Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to add those comments.
Great. Thanks, Bethan. Rachel?
Can I just come in on the point you made, Jane? Because I think that is where we will have a further discussion, because I probably have a slightly different lens on this indicator. It's an indicator which, in the very short time that I was acting chief executive, reputationally, I think the fact that the very extended delays that we are seeing in terms of responding to patients and to other stakeholders about very serious incidents, I think is reputationally damaging to the organisation. So I think there is, you're right, you could see it in both lenses, but personally, I think there is an argument for it being retained as a board indicator, because it's an indicator of how well we're responding to people who we have already let down in some instances, and then we're exacerbating that through. So I think that's the conversation we can have in board development. It's where is it best that we put some of these indicators?
And if I could just add there, Chair, Rachel and I, when Rachel was the interim chief exec, and previously with Jason and I'm sure, with Emma as we move forward, it's not just, it's very difficult for those families who are waiting, we know, and very distressing, and often, and without trying to sound flippant, adds insult to injury often. But also it has a knock-on effect to some very senior stakeholders, and particularly politicians, because they often then take up the cudgels on behalf of that constituent, quite rightly. And Rachel and I had a couple of particularly difficult conversations with some very senior cabinet level MPs at the back end of September on these cases, which weren't just linked, in fairness, to delays in PTR, but also linked to sort of tone of correspondence, these kind of things. So there are broad spectrum kind of knock-on effects. So recognising the pressures around volume and around the capacity of the team, etc. We just need to be mindful that that those impacts are quite widespread, both for us and our people, and also for those families and wider stakeholders.
I think just reinforces the fact that we've got some more discussions to have on this. Yeah, we won't rehearse it further here, I think, but defer that to our board development in December. Okay, so in terms of this item, MIQPR, is for noting. Just checking any further questions anywhere. I don't see any, so thanks very much, Rachel, for that. And let's move on to the second of your items in this little pair, item number 12, which is the IMTP.
Yeah.
And just an update really on the progress for developing that. I know it had quite an outing at F&P, which
yes,
will
absolutely.
in a minute. But
yeah,
Rachel, for a moment.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, and I won't rehearse the details of the progress we've made. I suppose I was just going to put out the kind of future steps in terms of, or next steps rather, in terms of next year's IMTP, just to kind of bring to the attention that from our commissioner lens in particular, they are, and this is a conversation we had yesterday, they are clear that next year will be a no investment year from their perspective. That's the kind of phrasing that they used. Our first set of priorities, which have come from board development sessions and from internal kind of leadership meetings, we'll be going to them at the end of November, as Emma mentioned. We've got a further discussion at board development in December again to refine our thinking on that. We'll have an internal prioritisation session in January with a group of leaders. But I think it's just to kind of make the point really that it is going to be a tough financial year with limited, if any, investment and potentially even reductions overall. As all organisations across the health system, are kind of facing very significant challenges. So hopefully plenty of touch points now for the board, over the next few months to kind of refine its thinking in terms of priorities. But I just wanted to put that commissioning context.
Thanks, Rachel. I think it's very valid. It's certainly having lots of touch points going through committees, going through our board development sessions and so on. Jen, did you want to say anything about F&P and?
Not really. I mean, I think it's been well rehearsed, and with Rachel's updates, and FPC was substantially reassured with the plans going forward. Also, as part of this item, we sort of look at the CMT and readiness for the new performance framework, etc. So nothing more to add really. That.
Okay. I don't know whether, Emma, you've got any comments you could make or want to share about the way in which the IMTP sort of process was kind of national perspective might be evolving with the new individuals that are now populating NHS performance and improvement and NHS executive, because this whole IMTP process, which all the health boards have to go through, ends up in a long and somewhat tedious process sometimes to produce long and complicated pieces of reporting, which one gets a feeling sometimes disappears into a bit of a Welsh government black hole, maybe.
Yeah, I think, Chair, I'm not entirely sure yet what the future will be around annual plans or IMTP. So if we think from the lens that the CEO for NHS Wales comes from an English system, we would be used to doing an annual plan and not a three-yearly plan. But then that plan is very much monitored in a very robust way by our regional NHS England colleagues, which isn't how NHS Wales is particularly set up in terms of performance monitoring. I think for us specifically, the interface with the JCC is an interesting one because we have health boards that are also our providers and our commissioners. So that's a strange relationship. I think this year's IMTP, as you know, we've wanted to make sure that we're really clear that it's about consolidation and not about necessarily doing new things. And I think that's going to sit really well with our commissioners who are being very clear to us that next year is not about any form of investment at all. And I think what we'll probably hear in the next year is language that maybe was similar to an English system, which is the money is the money. That was a phrase that became pretty integrated into our sort of psyche. So because I think the money will be the money. And I think we'll have to fit our services around that, and we'll have to think about what we go back to in terms of the commissioning offer. So I think that execs spoke about this quite a bit yesterday, about being really clear that if we know how much our budget's going to be, about going and saying, actually, to deliver this is the level of service you're going to get. Because what we won't get this year is an opportunity. I don't think we'll get an opportunity to meet the health boards and strategically position the WAST offer. I think the timelines that we've got in this paper show that opportunity is probably gone. I think we'll have to work that into the future financial years. So I think we'll have to work out our services in the budget that we've got, and we might have conversations rehearsing what we just talked about there as an example of 111 to say, it's not a 5% abandonment, it's going to be 15, because actually the money only enables us to have this amount of service to cover this amount. And I think that's the scenarios we need to go in. We certainly can't go into the JCC with oh, by the way, if you funded us for X, Y, Z, we could do A, B, C, because they've made it abundantly clear there is no new money. I think we have to right size and give them options. So if you want this, it might come at a cost to this, and then let the health boards determine what they want from that.
realistic pricing model,
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, just on the kind of the approach to planning, you're right. I think there may well be a shift. We don't know yet with Jacqueline. What I would say is that the way we try to build the planning process, obviously in WAST, is almost irrelevant of the final document, and what Welsh Government do or don't do with it. It is about us understanding as an organisation what we want to do. And I think having only a 1 year lens isn't just the right lens. I think we need to see, so whether it's 3 or a 5 year lens, I don't know. But as an organisation, I think it's good. We have a good process and we allow ourselves to understand what are our own priorities and how we then going to spend our own money to make those things happen with an eye to what commissioners and others think. But it's the process itself shouldn't be about serving Welsh Government with a document and a tick box exercise. And I think we do that well in WAST in terms of that.
I just want to say, my understanding is from being in the ICB territory in the NHS in England, is actually they're moving to a 5 new planning framework, and it's going to be 5 year, and they're delighted because it gives that more longitude, particularly where they want to have impact on inequalities at what they call place and neighbourhood. So actually, they're getting closer to the Welsh kind of model in that context. So it's just interesting.
It would be great if we had a financial strategy that met the plan, though, wouldn't it? So actually it is, and we never will have that. We'll always lurch from year to year. And I think that's where the lack of joined upness impedes, I think, for people to do proper strategic planning, because you just don't know. This year we would have done lots of work with our CMT and our ambulance performance framework, probably believing that we would carry on with the innovations potentially funded next year, and that's not going to happen. That doesn't mean we aren't going to carry on with the commitments we've made, but we're going to have to moderate them. So it's a real shame that we just don't have that joined up financial planning with planning. That would be amazing. I don't think we'll see it.
Okay, nothing on the screen, so just looking around, doesn't look like any more questions. So this is an item for noting, which we duly do, and we'll come back to it as it evolves over the next few months before final submittal. So we now move, what is always the highlight, Ed, of the morning, financial performance. We've been talking about finance, so it couldn't be more timely. So Ed, shall we pass over to you for your paper in terms of performance to date, and perhaps more importantly, a little bit of thought about how it might be shaping up for the end of the year.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the paper as read as usual. So just to pull out some key points. In terms of the revenue position year to date, we're still reporting a year to date deficit, which is now 135,000. However, that is an improvement from last month. So we have had a in-month small surplus of 51,000. So we are on the correct trajectory as per our plan and IMTP to have a break-even position by year end. In terms of the capital spend, that again is on target. Progress is going well with the schemes that we have out there at the moment, and the teams are reporting back well in advance of where we thought we were going to be actually in some of the schemes. So that's really positive for this time of the financial year. In terms of savings, again, we're overachieving in month. In months was 4.972 million. Total year to date savings against a plan of 4.904 million. So again, an overachievement there. And in relation to public sector payment policy, PSPP, against the target of 95, we've achieved 98.7 by number of invoices paid and 99.1% by value. Again, so very positive in terms of where we are with paying our suppliers. So that's the key elements of the paper. Just to draw some people's attention to, we have, as mentioned at the last board, we have got a significant risk in relation to Welsh Risk Pool. That has slightly increased again this month. So what we're doing is we're liaising with NHS Shared Services around the Welsh Risk Pool and getting monthly reports. So we have increased our risk only by circa 100,000 in month. In relation to the worst case scenario, which is currently being reported through. We do have the most likely position reported into our position, which is unlike some of the health boards have previously. So our break-even position does take into account the most likely situation that we're going to achieve, but we wanted to flag the additional risk associated with the latest forecast as the latest worst case forecast. So that brings me to the end of the paper. So I don't know if there's any questions. Happy to take them.
Well, thanks, Ed. So no hands up on the screen. Questions. So we go on to in reverse cycle this time. We go clockwise, don't we?
Can I just ask the trust reserve, in red, 55.5%. Is that because of how we want to mitigate the risks that you've just described potentially?
Yes, so we pulled some funding out in advance of where we were planning on to spend that money, which is why it's showing as an overspend against, but that is offset against some underspends in other directorates.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This got a good airing at FPC. So just really to recap some of the salient points, I think it's important to start off by congratulating Ed on the team in terms of the quality of the in-year financial management and control, because as you know, we've got a number of uncertainties hitting us. And what this paper is saying, despite the early months of deficits, all things being equal, it looks like we will achieve a balanced budget, which within the sector, is a good achievement. I think we should note that. I've got four brief points, which aren't so much about the in-year, but with an eye to next year and beyond, because we've heard at various times throughout the morning, it's going to be a much tougher year next year than it is this year. The first point is point 4 in the report, page 5. FPC were keen to see if there was correlation between the reduced handover hours and financial efficiencies, not so much in terms of cash releasing, but more in terms of the ability to deploy those resources elsewhere. So Ed very kindly is going to do an exercise looking at the implications on shift overruns, time off in lieu, all that kind of stuff, just so we've got that information at our fingertips. And that does tie into, I think, your point, Emma, about, in terms of knowing how much we spend on what and what things cost. Yeah. It adds to that data bank. So that'll be a good piece of work. Second point, paragraph 12 on the savings. Great that we're hitting it. But again, with one eye to next year, it'd be fantastic if we could achieve our non-recurrent savings target. At the moment, it's slightly flipped towards our non-recurrent. So if we could achieve it, we're only about 96k down forecast for the year end. But if we could do all we can to achieve our recurrent savings, I think that would really, really help. The third point is about de-risking the budget to the year end. Ed has covered the Welsh risk pool, which is difficult to comprehend because it shifts every month. Yeah. So it's difficult. And the other issue is national insurance contribution, but that's been nailed down. But I think in FPC, we wanted just to make sure there were no other unforeseen headwinds that were going to knock us off course. And I think we were assured on that. My final point is capital. Again, a well done. That capital programme is significantly higher this year than previous years because of the extra Welsh Government capital for fleet. There was just a minor question that we've got 5 million out of the door so far, but the budget is 30. So I just asked Ed and team, will we get the 25 million out on the fact that we have to use the cash in year? Yeah, I think we've got good assurance that all those vehicles and all that ambulance stations that we've heard about, the money and the capital and the invoices will be paid by the 31st of March. So that, again, given the fact it's almost double the capital programme from previous years, is no mean achievement.
No, absolutely. Do you want to come in on that point as chair of that committee? Just to...
So, well, beautifully put by Peter, I think, yes. In terms of summarising when we were on the finance, so we do challenge, and I think we set some rigour in terms of that, despite the fact we have absolute confidence in the way that the management goes on, because we know it's so important. The only thing I would add is it was really helpful. We had a substantive update from the Financial Sustainability Programme. And I think, there's a thread, isn't there, today about how important that is. And I was really pleased to see the risk appetite that we've got, because I think we're going to need it. And I would welcome some early testing of that whole decision making and the use of a risk appetite on that. So I think we have asked the programme to come back to us with a plan by the end of the financial year. But no, other than that, it's in the AAA, it's the single alert.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, Peter. So, Ed,
Thank you. Yes, so just to come back on some of Peter's points there. So in terms of the toil and overruns, we are going to bring in a table into the report in future months, which will illustrate the trajectory of that spend and the time that's been incurred in lieu. So that will be included in the reports in future months going forward. In terms of the recurrent savings, obviously we're pushing as much as we can around that. It is the nature of some of the non-recurrents that they do seem to increase more so, and especially with some of the drive that we're pushing to ensure financial balance this year. Directorates are overachieving in that area because they know the pressures that we're facing. Again, in terms of capital, I would actually say the forecast is ahead of my original plan at the start of the year. And that is in relation to the fact that we got the fleet monies early notification from Welsh Government in last financial year that this was going to happen. So we were able to place the orders, and something that we'll touch upon in closed as well, in terms of being able to make savings within the scheme to allow us to progress things faster and more efficiently. So in terms of that, we're very happy in terms of where we are with expenditure to date, and the teams are pushing really fast with that in terms of where we're going.
Okay, thank you. Good, thanks, Ed. So looking around the table, any more questions or comments on finances? I mean, you're right, Jane, it is a thread running through, and I think next year we'll probably be even more focused on finance than we are this year, and most of the health boards seem to be continuing to run a deficit and struggling to meet the requirement to break even, which means that any incoming government after the Senate elections are likely to face an even more difficult financial position. Yes, which will have implications, no doubt, for us. Okay. All right, thanks very much, Ed. We'll move on in that case, because this is an item to note for everything which we duly have done. So we move on to item number 14, which is over to you, Estelle, for partnerships stakeholder engagement.
Thanks very much, folks. And I think that throughout the meeting today, actually, we've touched on engagement in various ways and various formats. So hopefully this paper is timely. It's the first sort of reinstatement of a board report on partnerships and engagement for some time. And I really welcome that, because we've already touched on the fact that the whole sort of engagement realm is really a board level accountability, because it straddles so many aspects of the organisation. I won't labour the point in terms of the detail of the report, but what I really wanted to summarise was, we're a large organisation with a very large footprint. We're one of the very few pan-Wales organisations, and therefore we have an absolute, plethora of stakeholders. And over the years, at various times, we've tried to take targeted, less targeted views of the world. We've tried to perhaps manage all of that stakeholder environment to a greater or lesser degree. And inevitably, because of the capacity that we have, we end up doing quite a lot of it, with very light touch, as opposed to looking at some of the core areas in detail. And I think what we've heard today is, which is hopefully replicated in this paper, is there are some real areas of focus that we need to look at in terms of engagement and partnership as we move forward, because we know we've got a number of shifting sands in the environment. We've just touched on the financial issues. We've talked potentially about some strategic kind of relationship stroke influencing gap with some of our key stakeholders, including health boards, both as providers and commissioners and partners in the system. We've talked about patients, and while that's not necessarily a focus here, it is something that we're talking about organisationally, about how do we focus that patient engagement in line with our organisational aims. So what this paper seeks to do is really to gain board support for narrowing the focus, but increasing the depth of engagement in a number of core areas, which indicatively, I've put some indicative ideas here. So I don't want you to get hung up too much on, do we really need to do academic partnerships? Do we really need to do X? Because that will fall out of the IMTP process in terms of where those 3-4 handful of areas are. The reason I've put in what I've put in terms of those indicative ideas is we know we've got some complementary work going on in terms of commercialisation, innovation, that will need some partnership approach, particularly with the commercial sector that we've never really touched on before. And that work, we've got a member of staff in Rachel's team now who's recently joined. Matt, very good, looking at all this work. Johnny, I know, is very keen on that you know, what's the commercial opportunity around digital, etc. We know that on the academic front, we've got some relationship management issues that we probably need to work on and look at so that we're influencing both curriculum development. Hayley, I'm thinking about you particularly here in terms of what's the future workforce that we need. How do we set about that? Because you and I know that takes a long time and it needs that kind of focused approach. And we've also got, and let's be honest about it, we've got a potentially very different environment post-May, if only because politically, not just the whatever colour that government ends up being, but we've got a potential changes in the civil service. We've already seen it with Jacqueline incoming, with potentially a different sort of approach to how we work with the civil service, with SPADs, and of course we're moving from 60 to 96 members of the Senedd. And a movement potentially from 12 to 17 ministers. Overlay that with, you know, the Westminster political arena, etc. And you know, it's a huge ask. And we know, Emma and I have discussed this in Q4. You know, we're going to do quite a bit of political engagement. I'm sure Emma and I did some yesterday. Particularly with political parties, we need to brief them over the next quarter, just in terms on a fairly straight bat, but just to make sure that people understand what we're about. But we know definitely post-May that level of political engagement, which I view as business as usual, will ramp up and will sap capacity for the executive team, hence the need to have that kind of focus. So what this proposes, I guess, is nothing not to forget, sorry, I should add, is the work that we're going to start to do on the long-term strategy and what that will mean in terms of engagement with stakeholders, with the public and patients. Admittedly, that's towards more towards the back end of next year, but that will roll on for probably a year, 18 months. And that will be a huge effort across a number of our different directorates. So what this proposes really and seeks is approval for that kind of more targeted but deeper approach. There'll be some stuff that's business as usual that we're never going to get away from, but rather than kind of spread ourselves, we do it in that way. Board reporting on some of that narrow and deep stuff could come through the IMTP reporting, could come through a refreshed MIQPR, and then the more generic business as usual stuff, the touch points, the political stuff, the RPB kind of stuff, we can bring that through here on the regular 6-monthly scheduled report from me, just so that you've got an eye on that too. So that's the proposal, Chair. A few bits and pieces to work out internally with colleagues in the exec team and through the IMTP process. So really, this is a direction of travel proposition, and that's the support I'm seeking today, Chair. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Estelle. John.
Yeah, I'm really supportive of this paper. I'm just thinking from a digital perspective, I think this will give us a really good opportunity to be intentional about some of the commercial partners we might want to build links with, and some of the innovation partners we might want to build links in. I was thinking around some of the co-development opportunities, how we build credibility with industry, with academia in some of this space. So yeah, really welcome paper, Chair. I think it's very powerful for us.
Good, thanks very much. Bethan, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I support the recommended approach, I guess, Estelle, in terms of having targeted approach moving forward. I think there's lots of really good comments in this report, and one of the comments talks about the engagement as we move forward needs to be less about numbers and more about outcomes and impact. I absolutely support that. It's the so what element, it's not just about numbers. Paragraph 15 says that as we must ensure that we continue to refresh our approach and include the work of the PECI team within that. So as we look at the overall engagement strategy, the work of the PECI team must be central. It's no surprise that I'm going to be supportive of that, because that's about the patient engagement. And I think there's a great opportunity here for us to be ambitious about how we do that moving forward, so that we can try to evolve our current approaches in line with the clinical model transformation that we're going through, and therefore develop ways where we can engage with a wider network of patients, so the information we gather in is more representative overall, rather than some of the long-standing targeted groups that we focused on historically. That's not a criticism. I see that as a great opportunity. My question comes from paragraph 22 right at the end. So it confirms that we're working on our response as a result of the internal audit on patient engagement. And again, it confirms that we must ensure that our organisational and strategic priorities are aligned with the work of the PECI team. My question is, and I heard your comment, Estelle, that it's probably the latter part of next year when we look at that wider patient stuff. But when can we realistically expect to see another version of this, some indication of the journey we're likely to go on, please? Thank you.
Thanks, Bethan, and I might defer to Liam here as well. But my view is with the patient engagement stuff, as you say, excellent work coming out of that team. Really long established relationships with certain groups in the sort of public realm. But we know that there's more to do. And as you say, both from and that was the internal audit finding, more around the geographic and the demographic, if I can put it, spread around that work. And clearly what's worked really well with colleagues from PECI in the last kind of year is bringing them into the fold of the work that we've done collaboratively on the CMT, the clinical model transformation, and the phasing of the performance management stuff. So colleagues from PECI have been embedded in that group. And that allows them both to bring what patient views and ideas and kind of skills that they have, but also for us to kind of align our work. And what I'm thinking, Bethan, is as a model for engagement in terms of how we do it across the organisation, there's going to be a bit about using that model of lateral, cross-functional, cross-directorate working. So we haven't got, a team over here engaging on that and a team over there engaging on this. Real read across into Liam's sphere and Rachel's sphere and Johnny's sphere without treading on sort of organisational toes, but making sure we've got that kind of integrated approach, because we've tested it now with the CMT. And I'm also conscious, because I'm looking at the screen and I'm looking at Angela, we've been talking about how Llais can also support us there by bringing in the intelligence they've got and acting as that critical friend to us as well. So, it's very easy for us to say, so we've done a bit of engagement over here, but actually using Llais's lens and say, well, actually, there's a bit you're missing here, and that's the gap you need to fill. So I think this is all to be worked through, Bethan, but absolutely, if we get support today, the work that myself and the other executives will need to do is to then move that dial so that you can get some assurance, but particularly, within the next 6 to 9 months, that you're confident, both through Quest and through the board, that our engagement activities are aligned with that organisational purpose, regardless of which kind of stakeholder or patient group we're talking about. Hope that helps.
Thanks, Brother. Coming over the hands. And Liam, do you want to respond to that? Then come to Rhiannon.
Yeah, just to layer a little bit onto everything that Estelle's shared. So I think we have enhanced, as you say, we've enhanced the work that we do cross-directorate in terms of understanding patient experience and how the community involvement and the wider stakeholder engagement piece all knits together. So I think we've definitely made some progress in that space this year. Colleagues will be aware that we've had quite a lot of changes going on underneath the umbrella of the duty of quality, which we've been responding to. So people will be aware the patient experience framework has changed in recent times. And one of the things that we're still struggling with as a trust, but we are desperately trying to resolve, is how we are able to digitalise our connectivity with people who call us on the 1s and the 9 service. And for the patient experience team, that's a really critical lever. Everything else they do is born out of either being in a room with the people who happen to turn up in a room, or born out of those that directly contact us in a proactive way, either for positive or negative experience. So again, Johnny and I have been going round that loop in terms of trying to navigate some of the challenges to being able to expedite that. The second bit then is on the back of the work that internal audit did a year ago, on the work that we've done around duty of quality. And I will also refresh, actually, since Emma has joined us and a real focus around the quality improvement, quality management system. I've been working with with my team, and we are aligning that patient experience much closer to the duty of quality and the quality improvement work. So not only will we see a greater integration, a greater matrix of working from a patient experience community involvement across the organisation, but actually that will knit closely with how we are dealing with quality improvement across the organisation, so that, you know, whether it's Rachel's team leading, Lee's team, or whoever's team leading, we see those two functions having a greater reach in support.
Okay, thanks, Liam. And to Rhiannon?
Yeah, thanks, Estelle. Really helpful, and broadly the sort of areas of foci, as you put it, and support.
I was challenged on the use of foci, I must say. What's the word? And it's the plural foci.
It is a word. Just a couple of additional sort of things to reflect on, I suppose. Well done on getting good membership in the RPBs. Sorry, I'll get there. Let's not forget safeguarding boards, because actually they've got a significant. I don't know how well we're doing on the parties, but that's not really my substantive question. When we're thinking about going forward with the strategy development, I wonder if we can be more explicit about the approach in terms of thinking of that participation ladder. Are we going to be consulting on what we've already kind of perhaps thought up, or are we going much more into that collaborative space? Being overt on that, I think, would be really helpful in preparing us to go forward in that way. I wonder if we need to tease out here the capital C commissioners. I don't mean the JCC, I mean key commissioners. And I've expressed this before. There may or may not be some merit in having some board to board, or board to chair, or board to commissioner specific engagement, so that we're more on their radar in terms of, you know, a board seeing people or having a dialogue together might be reasonably impactful. I'm not saying we can evidence that, but it's just some thoughts.
Great. And on the relationship front, absolutely. I mean, I know Liam's team in particular, with the Old People's Commissioner and the younger person, the Children's Commissioner, and myself with the Future Gens Commissioner, we do have some interface, but maybe it's not as structured as it could be added here to the board.
It's certainly what happens in some other boards, and why shouldn't WAST?
No, it's really helpful observation. Thank you, Rhiannon.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Any other questions, Johnny?
Yeah, sorry, if I could just pick up on one piece that Liam mentioned there around the work that we're doing on one-on-one digitisation. So we're really well connected in with the PECI team. What I'm really keen on doing is that we have human-centred technology, as opposed to just throwing technology out there. So I'm really keen on hearing from patients and a broad spectrum of different groups and networks that we've got. Andrew, I'm looking right at you at the screen. I definitely want to connect in with Claes on this, and I guess recognising we're in an open meeting, if there are any patients that are listening into this, it would be useful to hear from anyone, both in terms of one-on-one, but actually what we want to do with broader digital offerings next year. So thinking around things like AI, access to data, an urgent care hub, that kind of world. So I just wanted to recognise that we have got some of those links in there already, Chair.
Thanks, Johnny. So on this item, we are asked to approve the focus of engagement. Sorry.
I'm really sorry, Chair. I just want to note on the safeguarding, because I think we're in a public meeting, I just need to be clear. So from a trust perspective, we work very closely with the National Safeguarding Service, and we have been working and liaising with them to confirm when we are active participants in every safeguarding board, and when we need to attend for reviews particularly. Otherwise, what we seek to do is offer assurance through the National Safeguarding Service on the level of support and provision we have, which is then the assurance that goes out to the safeguarding boards at a national level, because servicing the volume of safeguarding boards directly at every meeting is not possible. So I just want to confirm that's the process through which we give assurance and we engage actively with our partners.
Great, thanks, Dave. Okay, so we were asked to approve the focus of engagement, the proposals to report it through the normal IMTP reporting process, and to receive a further report in due course, probably on a 6-monthly basis. All content to do that. Direction of travel confirmed, Estelle?
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we come now to item 15, which is board committee reports. This is, for anybody watching externally, just that part of the agenda where we can touch base with the committee chairs to make sure that any items that they were discussing in their committee meetings that need to be brought to the attention of the full board are done. We've heard a lot of activity from committee chairs as we've gone through the agenda. So some of this has already been done, but we'll use this as an opportunity to take a check to make sure we cover everything. So firstly, the Academic Partnership Committee. I think, Hayley, you're just going to give us a quick overview of anything that we might need to be aware of from your meeting in October.
Thank you. So just a few things I wanted to touch on. We had one item in the alert section, which was the proposal to stand down APC and redistribute its responsibility. So this was endorsed by the committee with a caveat that we needed to ensure visibility of research and collaboration, and that they should be appropriately scheduled. In the advice section, I provided an update mainly in relation to my membership of the Championing Research as an Independent Member Committee. Just an update from that and some reports that they've produced. Just to add to that, I attended another of those meetings this week, and there was a clear steer from that committee to ensure that research was clearly embedded in our INPT going forward. We received the strategic action plan publication, and the committee reflected the significant research and innovation activities and the importance of bringing together people to discuss those within the committee. In the Assure section, we received the annual R&I report and commended the team for the work undertaken, which demonstrated clear breadth and prestige of the research activities undertaken. It was noted by the committee that we needed to consider the impact of that research in the real world. So that was something for consideration. The committee recognised the progress highlighted by the Health and Care Research Wales review and efforts to embed research as a WAST core function. And the committee noticed it was positive to see the appointment of a new research lead to help support that. And finally, the committee noted WAST alignment with the NHS R&D framework and substantial progress made against the 10 pillars. And we were assured by the development of the 5-year strategic plan.
Thank you very much. Any questions to Hayley?
Yeah, just I guess a point of clarification as well, because whilst we've agreed to disband APC, we are going to defer that pending an external review as well, a more wider external review. So APC will continue to meet one more time this, I was going to say academic year then, financial year. And the plan is twice next year unless we change things mid-year. And I think that's important, that visibility of research will not be diluted either. And that's a key principle of this.
No, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. So to Bethan, I don't know, would you to get the opportunity, give us a run through anything that you were focusing on in Quest that we've not already talked about?
Lovely, thank you, Chair. So we met on the 4th of November. We have the AAA in front of us, but I'll draw out some key points. Before I go into those, I just want to mention we were very pleased to welcome a colleague from the JCC to our meeting as an observer. So it was great to have them there with us. In the alert section, we discussed the data reporting error. That links to an earlier conversation we had around the 30-day response to our complaints. And we noted that the June and August PTR data was over-reported and therefore performance was lower than what was reported at that time. However, and importantly, we were assured as a committee that there's improved technical capability in place now, and therefore we have confidence in the accuracy of data and the future reporting. I won't go into the PTR recovery plan, we covered it earlier, so I'll move us on to the advice section. We, as usual, had a patient story, and we heard from Alison on this occasion, Alison Clark, who's a frequent user of our non-emergency patient transport. We heard from Alison the significant impact that last-minute cancellations have on her in so many ways, both the emotional toll that it has, the impact on her physical well-being as well, and also the frustration caused by the lack of clear communication from the trust. We heard that the issue it arises from the fact there's a mismatch between demand and capacity in this area. And this actually just highlights ongoing high demand in the NEPT service, which we also saw in the PTR report. It came through very strongly. As always, we were very grateful to Alison for sharing her story so openly with us, and it gives us a lot of ideas for how we need to make improvements moving forward. Sticking with patient story, we had an update on the patient story from August. That was Sophie's story. And there's been lots of positive work undertaken since then. So we've developed more easy read resources. We've progressed around our approach to reasonable adjustments. And also we've engaged further with learning disability groups about how we define a quality service. We approved the Prevent policy. We discussed the clinical plan and within that noted the proposal to initiate a full revision of the clinical plan, one that would be aligned with the new ambulance performance framework. And within this, we also noted that much of that transformation is already underway through the CMT programme. Moving to the Assure section, again, I won't talk about the PTR Q2 report. We discussed near miss and low harm reporting, and previously ARC had received our annual assurance report. However, that only provided limited assurance, and therefore ARC have requested a further update in March next year, which we will, of course, provide. We discussed the strategic quality plan implementation and received partial assurance around progress relating to that. Work is ongoing, and also we noted and heard very clearly the positive impact that the quality team's work is having across the trust very widely. We've talked a lot about PECI and their work today, and we received the biannual report from the PECI team. As always, it was filled with lots of great examples of their networking and their communication and engagement with wide ranges of individuals across Wales. That report confirmed compliance with our statutory duties and also noted so very many positive aspects. We received the mental health annual report, and as always, there were lots of positives within that. I'd like to draw attention to the success of the Gwent Mental Health Response Vehicle, and because of the level of success with that initiative, the Trust is considering opportunities for expanding that service, which committee members welcomed. We began the first part of our quality governance review that was undertaken, and coming out of that, there is a desire for us to focus more on the effectiveness of QMS as a whole moving forward. We've talked a lot about risks 223 and 224 today, so I won't labour those. The only other thing I would say is we did note some new risks, particularly around continuing pressures on our people, which again has been a theme today, and also the wider resourcing challenges that I think will become even more challenging over coming months and next year. I'll pause at that point, Chair, but happy to take comments or questions.
Thanks very much, Bethan, and gives a good highlight as to just how much work is done in committees. Any further questions to Bethan? It's very comprehensive. No, okay, thanks very much, Bethan. That's appreciated. Hayley, I think we're coming back to you again. You've got substitute hats today, and this time it's people and culture.
Thank you. So we've already covered a lot of these issues in the board. So just to pick up a few things, in the alert section, we received a request to extend the people and culture plan until April 2027. The committee endorsed this request based on its continued relevance and alignment with strategic priorities. In the advice section, we had a really interesting presentation from 3 tutors from the Essential Skills team. They outlined WAST's personalised learning packages that were equivalent to GCSEs. The committee were encouraged by WAST's approach and the offer of this training for individuals who may not have achieved more formal qualification. We also heard about future training initiatives, including digital skills, higher level apprenticeships and tailored support. And the aim of those was to widen participation and inclusion. The committee discussed the need for flexible learning opportunities, clarity on abstraction and funding, and review of training metrics. Also in the advised section, we received reports from the Director of Culture Change and Director of People. There was positive news on the response rate to the staff survey, and we received updates on the Mastering Diversity Conference, Speaking Up Safely Month and Volunteer Conference, and feedback was very positive on all of those. We received lots of information on local and national accolades, including Angie. Congratulations. And an update on the apprenticeship programme. On the operational side, we received a highlight report, including further investment in training for emergency medical dispatch roles and progress in operations quality. We also received an update on the ongoing EMP training, noting that abstraction for training was still challenging. It was also noted that there was an ongoing review of APP rosters and integrated care roles. The committee also welcomed an update on the task and finish group to reduce overruns. There was a robust discussion about the upcoming phase 2 go live of the clinical model, which we've already mentioned this morning. And the committee were assured that staff were ready and that additional resources have been put in place to support implementation. In the assure section, the committee reviewed the MIQPR people metrics, which showed some encouraging signs of improvement in many areas. The PADR completion rate was brought up, and there was robust discussion regarding the falling completion rates. The committee were, however, assured that despite this fall, that there had been improvements in informal check-ins, and queried whether these could be incorporated into the PADR, and Angie's already mentioned that. And we also received assurance, particularly in relation to the violence and aggression figures. The committee received an update on the 2025 Workforce Race Equality Standards report. They noted the low ethnic workforce diversity, which we've already heard about today, but were encouraged by WAST's proactive initiatives and commended the progress made. And I think Angie wanted to add something.
Yeah, that's okay.
George, yeah.
Thank you, Hayley. Just in terms of the res report, whilst, and you will have seen in the AAA, whilst we were really pleased that Welsh Government have recognised our commitment and our passion for this topic, we absolutely recognise we've got to do better, we've got to do it faster. I just think it was important that we acknowledge we're not complacent in any way. We know we have more to do. And I think hearing from Rashna earlier was really powerful in terms of that commitment. And I think with Rashna, with our Beam network, but I just want to also give a shout out to Meshach as our aspiring board member. Meshach has been instrumental in terms of challenging us, in terms of how are we going to improve this situation. And I think Rashna's comment around why not WAST? Her dissertation is going to be pivotal to that. But I also just wanted to draw a light on some positive work around the recruitment campaign that we did in digital. So formally thank Johnny for the work that his team did in collaboration with our ED&I colleagues to actually reach out to a broad audience. As a result of that initiative, we filled 19 roles, 26.7% of those came from Black and minority ethnic colleagues, which is excellent. And it means we can do this. But also a byproduct of that initiative was we saw an increase in other protected characteristics, disability, sexual orientation, and Welsh language speakers. So we know that if we do these types of initiatives, they really will reap the rewards. So I just wanted to give some assurance and also tell you, we'll be taking that model and some of the learning that we've got it, and we're going to be applying it in the clinical control centres from January. So I really hope that we'll be able to show even more progress in that space. And I think one thing just to say for us as a board is the call for action to us is to keep this on the agenda, to keep challenging ourselves about better, faster, but also to keep making sure we're connecting and engaging with those with lived experience, both internally and externally, feeding it back in, telling us where we can improve, but also then really sharing good practice. And I just want to, I'll give a shout out to Emma as well, sharing really good practice that they did in her previous organisation about potential programmes that we can do internally. And finally, just in terms of the staff survey, really pleased to say 40.9% representation on that. So we've exceeded our internal target, but we still have a few days to go. And we know that if we can increase the representation of people participating that will directly impact on the work we're doing around inclusion. So really good news, but I just wanted to give that extra bit of assurance. We are not complacent.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and then over to Jane for any final items that we haven't already covered on finance and performance.
Right, well, as you said, covered most of it. I've sought to do that, I think, in the body of Trust Board. Just one thing to add really was around the Q2 operational update. We talked about challenges on rurality, because we very much want to strengthen the Trust service offer there to make sure there's equitable response times and outcomes as ever. The lovely Welsh geography does place a bit of a challenge in terms of that. We could also accept a request from WAST to review service delivery on NEPs, because there's ongoing, I think, just high demand for NEPs really, and some challenges in terms of cancellations. So very much accepted that. So I think it illustrates effective governance really, that we can deal with these sort of cross-cutting issues between committees. But that's all I was going to add. I'd just look to Peter and Bethan, other NED's colleagues, in case they want to add anything else.
Good. Thanks very much, Jane. Any other anything okay with you? Everybody else content? Excellent. Okay, thanks very much indeed. So that completes the review of our committees. We move on to consent items. So item 16, which is governance report from Trish. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, thank you.
That's for our noting. Item 17 are minutes of board committees. 3 committee minutes are there: patient quality, people and culture, finance and performance. Just pausing to make sure nobody wants to comment on those. Then item 18, reflections and summary. We've had a number of approvals. I'm not going to rehearse those again. We've done those as we've gone through. Any reflections on today's meeting that anybody wanted to make? I think it's been a very comprehensive meeting today, and a very, very interesting staff story as it happens, which reflects very well and connects very well with some of our key priorities here in the sort of people domain. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, at AOB, just give a pause in case anybody has got anything they wanted to suddenly throw into the mix. Very good. So in that case, all that remains is for us to pass the resolution in sense to exclude press and public. We will take a lunch break and we will reconvene as a closed board.